I got divorced and moved overseas without telling a soul. My ex-wife married her new boyfriend immediately. My own son stood up at the wedding and said he would be the best man. Then he looked right at the camera and added, "He is a good, wealthy man, not like you, Dad." I watched it all from a laptop screen in Lisbon, sipping vintage wine. But during the reception, a guest whispered one sentence that made my ex-wife lose her mind. And then she called me screaming. Before I tell you how I destroyed their lives without lifting a finger, please like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you. Let me know in the comments where you are watching this story of justice from. The sound of the judge's gavel hitting the wood was the loudest thing I had heard in 40 years. It echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Divorce granted. My wife of 35 years, Loretta, let out a sigh of relief that sounded more like a laugh. She did not even look at me. She was too busy looking at the man sitting in the back row. Arthur Banks. He was 72, just a year older than me, but he tried hard to look 50. He wore a suit that was too shiny, a gold watch that was too big, and a smile that was too wide. He looked like a used car salesman who had just closed the deal of a lifetime. And in his mind, he had. He had just stolen my wife. I looked down at my own clothes. I was wearing my Sunday best, a charcoal suit I had bought 10 years ago for a funeral. The elbows were worn thin. My hands, resting on the defense table, were rough. They were the hands of a man who had spent 40 years as a chief engineer for the railway system. They were covered in calluses and old grease stains that no amount of scrubbing could ever fully remove. To Loretta, these hands were shameful. To Arthur, they were a joke. To me, they were trophies of survival. Loretta leaned over to sign the final papers. The smell of her expensive perfume, paid for by Arthur, drifted over to me. She whispered, low enough so the judge could not hear, but loud enough for me. Finally free. You can go back to counting your pennies, Jeremiah. Arthur is taking me to Paris next week. Try not to starve in that old house alone. I did not respond. I just picked up my pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name, Jeremiah Brooks, with a steady rhythm. I was not angry. Anger is a waste of energy. And at 71, I did not have energy to waste on fools. I was just calculating. I was adjusting the tracks before the train wreck happened, but the blows kept coming. I stood up to leave and my son Terrence blocked my path. My boy. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy whose college tuition I had paid for by working double shifts on the night line in the freezing cold. He was 38 now, soft in the middle, wearing a suit he could not afford. He put a hand on my shoulder, but there was no warmth in it. "Dad, listen," Terrence said, his voice loud, performing for the room. "Just let it go. Mom deserves this. She deserves a man who knows how to live. Arthur is generous. He understands that money is meant to be spent, not hoarded under a mattress. You are a good guy, Dad, but you are obsolete. You hold on to every dollar like it is your last breath. It is embarrassing." I looked at my son. I saw the greed in his eyes. He did not see a father. He saw an ATM that had stopped dispensing cash. I nodded slowly. "Is that so, Terrence? I am obsolete because I saved?" Before he could answer, his wife, Skylar, stepped up beside him. Skylar was 32, blonde, sharp-featured, and had eyes like a hawk spotting a dying rabbit. She had never liked me. I was just the old black man who took up too much space in her husband's potential inheritance. She leaned in close, pretending to give me a goodbye hug. Her lips brushed my ear, cold and dry. "Do us all a favor, Jeremiah," she whispered. Her voice was like ice. "Don't drag this out. You are old. You have high blood pressure. Just die soon so Terrence can get the house. We have plans for that land, and you are just in the way." It was a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. My own daughter-in-law was wishing for my death in the middle of a courtroom. I pulled back and looked at her. She smiled, a sweet, innocent smile for the rest of the room, but her eyes dared me to make a scene. She wanted me to explode. She wanted the angry old man to cause a commotion so they could feel justified in throwing me away. I did not give them the satisfaction. I straightened my tie. I looked at Terrence, then at Skylar, then over their shoulders at Loretta and Arthur, who were already celebrating with a high five. "Take the house," I said calmly. My voice was steady, deep, the voice of a man who had shouted over roaring train engines for decades. "The judge gave it to you, Loretta. It is yours. And the pension. Take half. It is all there in the paperwork." Loretta laughed. "Of course I will take it, Jeremiah. It is the least you owe me for boring me to death for 3 decades. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. I did not look back. I could hear their laughter behind me. They thought they had won. They thought they had stripped a senile old man of his only assets. They thought I was walking out of there broken, poor, and alone. They were wrong. I walked out the heavy oak doors of the courthouse and into the bright sunlight. I took a deep breath of fresh air. It tasted like freedom. A black sedan pulled up to the curb the moment my foot touched the sidewalk. The window rolled down. It was not a taxi. It was a private car. Inside sat Mr. Goldstein. He was 80 years old, with white hair and a mind sharper than a razor blade. He had been my lawyer and financial advisor for 30 years. People looked at me and saw a retired railway worker in a cheap suit. Goldstein looked at me and saw one of the savviest real estate investors in the state. "Get in, Jeremiah," Goldstein said. "Is it done?" I slid into the leather seat. The air conditioning was cool and quiet. "It is done," I said. "They signed everything. They took the house. They took the split on the railway pension." Goldstein chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "The house on Elm Street? The one valued at $400,000? "That is the one," I said. "And the pension pays out $2,000 a month. Loretta thinks she hit the jackpot." "And the rest?" Goldstein asked, handing me a glass of sparkling water. "The rest is invisible," I said. "See, here is what my family never bothered to ask. They saw me go to work in grease-stained coveralls. They saw me fix my own plumbing to save $50. They saw me drive a 10-year-old Ford truck. They assumed that was all there was. They never knew about the nights I spent studying market trends. They never knew about the first duplex I bought in the 80s when the market crashed. They never knew that I leveraged that duplex to buy an apartment building, then a commercial lot, then a warehouse district. They never knew that Jeremiah Brooks, the cheap old engineer, owned a real estate portfolio worth $12 million, all held in blind trusts, all shielded by LLCs with names that had nothing to do with me. Loretta wanted the house on Elm Street. She could have it. It was the only asset in my personal name. It was the decoy. "Activate Operation Lisbon," I told Goldstein. Goldstein nodded and typed a command into his tablet. "It is already in motion. The liquidity transfer is complete. Your accounts in the U.S. are effectively empty, except for the mandatory pension deposits for Loretta. The bulk of the capital has been moved to the accounts in Portugal and Switzerland. Your flight leaves in 3 hours. First class." "Good," I said. "But there is one loose end." "The furniture?" Goldstein asked. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in months. The court order said Loretta gets the house. It said nothing about the contents. That collection of mid-century modern furniture, the vintage railway clocks, the art pieces I collected quietly for 40 years, they think that comes with the house. It does not, Goldstein confirmed. You retain personal property rights. I checked my watch. It was 11 in the morning. Terrence and Skylar were planning to move into the house at 1 o'clock. They had told me they were going to turn my study into a game room. "Sell it all," I said. "My buyer is standing by." "He is waiting for your signal," Goldstein said. "His team is around the corner from the house. They can strip the place bare in 45 minutes. "Do it," I said. "Leave them the light bulbs. I am not cruel." Goldstein made the call. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. I imagined the scene. I imagined Skylar walking into that house, her eyes full of greed, expecting to find my treasures, expecting to find the things she had already mentally sold to pay for her credit card debt. She was going to find 4 walls and a floor. "Drive me to the airport," I said. "I am done with America." The car pulled away from the curb. As we merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Terrence. "Dad, just so you know, we are changing the locks at the house at 1 p.m. Don't bother coming by to pick up your junk. We are tossing it all in the dumpster. Skylar doesn't want your old man smell in our new home." I looked at the message. I did not reply. I simply deleted the thread, then took the SIM card out of my phone and snapped it in half. "Goodbye, Terrence. You wanted the house? You got the house. But you forgot one thing, son. A house is just a box. It is expensive to heat, expensive to cool, and taxes are due in 3 months. And you just lost the only man who knew how to keep the boiler running. I sat in the first-class lounge at JFK Airport, watching the planes take off. I held a glass of champagne in my hand. For years, I drank cheap beer because Loretta complained if I bought anything else. Now, I could buy the whole brewery. My phone, the new one Goldstein had given me with an encrypted international number, pinged. It was an email from the private investigator I had hired to keep an eye on things back home. Just a simple photo. It was a picture of my old house on Elm Street. A moving truck was pulling away. The front door was open. Standing in the doorway were Terrence and Skylar. Even from the grainy photo, I could see the shock on their faces. Skylar's mouth was open in a scream I couldn't hear. Terrence was slumped against the doorframe, looking into an empty living room. Below the photo was a text. Subject looks distressed. House is empty. Neighbors reporting a noise disturbance. I took a sip of champagne. The first domino had fallen. They thought they had kicked a dog out of the house. They did not realize they had just locked themselves in a cage, and the rent was coming due. But this was just the beginning. I knew Arthur Banks. I knew him better than Loretta did. I had Goldstein run a background check on him the day he started sniffing around my wife. Arthur wasn't rich. Arthur was a ghost. He drove leased cars. He wore fake watches. He was running a classic Ponzi scheme, targeting widows and divorcees in our church community. I could have warned Loretta. I could have told her that her new boyfriend was a shark, but she had looked at my calloused hands and called me a failure. She had looked at my savings account and called me a miser. She chose the glitter over the gold. So I decided to let nature take its course. Arthur needed money. He always needed new money to pay off the old investors. And now, he had a new wife with a paid-off house and a son who was desperate to prove he was a big shot. I boarded the plane to Lisbon. The flight attendant took my jacket. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Brooks. Can I get you anything before we take off?" "Yes," I said, looking out the window at the New York skyline one last time. "I'll have the filet mignon, and keep the wine coming. I have a wedding to celebrate." "A wedding, sir? Who is getting married?" "My ex-wife," I said. "She is marrying a disaster, and I have a front row seat." As the plane lifted off, leaving the gravity of my old life behind, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was clarity. I had spent my life building a safety net for people who wanted to cut the ropes. Now, the net was gone. I was flying toward a villa on the coast of Portugal, toward a portfolio of assets that grew while I slept, toward a future where no one called me obsolete. Back on the ground, in the empty house on Elm Street, my son was realizing that the antique rug he planned to sell for $10,000 was gone. My daughter-in-law was realizing the vintage china she wanted to pawn was gone. And somewhere in a penthouse apartment that he couldn't afford, Arthur Banks was looking at Loretta and wondering just how much equity he could squeeze out of that house before the bank realized he was a fraud. They were hungry wolves, all of them, and I had just removed the only shepherd who kept them fed. Let the feast begin. Loretta did not waste a single second. As soon as the ink was dry on the divorce papers, she was packing her bags with a speed that was almost impressive. She threw 35 years of memories into cardboard boxes, as if they were trash. She was moving into Arthur's penthouse downtown. She told me it was a place befitting a woman of her stature. I knew it was a rental paid for with money Arthur had swindled from the church fund, but I kept my mouth shut. I watched her drive away in Arthur's leased convertible, her scarf blowing in the wind, not looking back at the house we had shared for decades. But the real show was about to begin. My son Terrence and his wife Skylar were waiting in the wings like vultures circling a dying animal. They had been eyeing my house on Elm Street for years. It was a sturdy 4-bedroom colonial that I had maintained with the precision of a railway engineer. To them, it wasn't a home. It was a piggy bank. They arrived exactly 1 hour after I left for the airport. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. I knew exactly what they were thinking because they had been loud about it for weeks. Skylar had already listed my vintage furniture collection on an online marketplace. I had seen the listings myself. She had taken photos of my living room when they came over for Christmas dinner, calculating the price of my hospitality. They parked their car in the driveway, grinning like they had just won the lottery. Skylar was holding a paint deck, probably planning to cover the original oak wainscoting with some trendy shade of gray. Terrence was on the phone, likely bragging to his friends that he had finally kicked the old man out. They walked up the path, confident and arrogant. They thought they were walking into a fully furnished treasure chest. They were dreaming of the hand-carved mahogany dining table that I had bought at an estate sale 20 years ago. They were thinking about the Persian rugs that were older than the country itself. They were counting the cash they would get for the grandfather clock in the hallway, a piece that had been in my family for 3 generations. Skylar had told Terrence she wanted to sell everything to pay off her credit cards and buy a new wardrobe for her new life as a homeowner. They thought they had stripped me bare. They thought the court order giving Loretta the house meant they owned every spoon, every chair, and every painting inside it. They were about to learn a very hard lesson about property law. Terrence put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly. I had oiled it last week. He pushed the heavy wooden door open, expecting to see the warm glow of the chandelier reflecting off the polished wood floors. He expected to see the leather armchairs where he used to sit and complain about his job. He expected to smell the old books in the library and the cedar of the cabinets. Instead, he stepped into an echo. The door swung open to reveal a vast, cavernous emptiness. The house was not just tidy, it was gutted. The living room was a barren expanse of hardwood floor. The Persian rugs were gone. The leather armchairs were gone. The coffee table, the lamps, the curtains, even the curtain rods were gone. Skylar pushed past him, her heels clicking loudly on the bare wood. She ran into the dining room, empty, just 4 walls and the dust outlines where the china cabinet used to stand. She ran into the kitchen. The refrigerator was there, because it was built in, but the movable island was gone. The stools were gone. The vintage copper pots that hung from the ceiling rack were gone. She ran up the stairs, her panic rising with every step. She checked the master bedroom. The king-sized bed frame, the dresser, the nightstands, all gone. The closet doors were open, revealing nothing but empty hangers. She checked the guest room. Empty. She checked the study, where I kept my collection of antique railway memorabilia. It was stripped clean. It was as if the house had been looted by a team of professional thieves. And in a way, it had been. My team. Goldstein's movers were the best in the business. They had cleared a 4-bedroom house in under 3 hours, wrapping every item in protective padding and loading it onto a truck bound for an auction house in London. Skylar stood in the middle of the empty living room, her face turning a shade of red that clashed with her blonde hair. She let out a scream that must have rattled the windows. "Where is it?" she shrieked, spinning around to face Terrence. "Where is the money, Terrence? Where is the furniture?" Terrence stood in the doorway, his mouth hanging open, looking like a fish that had been slapped onto a dock. "I do not know," he stammered. "It was all here yesterday. I saw it. He was supposed to leave it." "Supposed to?" Skylar mocked him, her voice dripping with venom. "You said the court gave the house to your mother. You said we got everything inside. That rug alone was worth $10,000, Terrence. I already promised it to a buyer. I have debts to pay." "What am I supposed to tell them now?" She marched up to him and shoved him hard in the chest. "You are useless. You let him do this. You let that senile old man outsmart you. You told me he was stupid. You told me he was a pushover. Does this look like the work of a pushover?" Terrence looked around the empty room, his eyes wide with shock. He walked over to the fireplace. The brass andiron set was gone. The painting that hung above the mantel was gone. There was just a nail left in the wall. "He stole it," Terrence whispered, trying to make sense of the situation. "He stole our inheritance." "He did not steal it, you idiot," Skylar yelled. "He took it. He took it all because you did not make him sign a contract for the contents. You just assumed. You are so weak, Terrence. Just like your father said, you are weak and you are broke." The sound of their fighting echoed off the bare walls, amplifying their misery. There was nowhere to sit, nowhere to rest, just the cold, hard reality of an empty house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor, and they realized with a sudden jolt that there were no lamps. I had taken the light bulbs from the floor lamps, and the overhead fixtures were turned off at the breaker. They were standing in the gathering dark, alone and furious. I was sitting in the first-class lounge at JFK, enjoying a glass of sparkling water and watching the runway lights, when my phone buzzed. It was Terrence. I let it ring 4 times before answering. I wanted him to sweat. "Hello, son," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Dad!" Terrence yelled, his voice cracking. "Where is the stuff? Where is the furniture? The house is empty. I took a slow sip of my water. Yes, Terrence, the house is empty. The court order stated that your mother, Loretta, was awarded the real property located at 142 Elm Street. Real property, son. That means the land and the structure. It does not mean the personal property inside it. But that was our stuff, Terrence screamed. We were counting on that. Skylar is freaking out. We have nothing to sit on. We have no bed. That sounds like a problem for a homeowner, I said. You wanted the house, Terrence. You stood in court and told me I was obsolete. You told me to die quickly so you could have it. Well, you have it. You have the walls, the floor, and the roof. Everything else, the things I bought, the things I collected, the things I worked for while you were sleeping in until noon, those belong to me, and I sold them. You sold them, he gasped. To who? We can get them back. They are currently in a shipping container crossing the Atlantic Ocean, I lied smoothly. They are gone, Terrence, and the money from the sale is in an account you will never touch. Dad, you cannot do this, he pleaded, his anger turning to desperation. We have no money. Skylar sold our old furniture because we thought we were getting yours. We have nowhere to sleep tonight. The floor is hardwood, son, I said. It is good for your back. You always said I was too cheap to buy good things. Now you do not have to worry about my cheap taste offending you. You are a monster, Terrence spat. A bitter, jealous old monster. I hope you die alone in Europe. I am not alone, Terrence, I said, looking around the lounge at the other travelers. I am surrounded by peace and quiet, something you will not have for a long time. Goodbye, son. I hung up the phone and removed the SIM card, snapping it in two and dropping it into my empty glass. The connection was severed. I felt a weight lift off my chest. I had spent my life cushioning the blow for him, and he had hated me for it. Now, he could feel the impact of the ground. Back at the house, the situation was deteriorating. Night had fully fallen. Terrence and Skylar were sitting on the floor of the living room, illuminated only by the flashlights on their phones. The heating system was off because I had canceled the utility service that morning. The house was getting cold. Skylar was sobbing, her face buried in her hands. This is a disaster. We are ruined. I owe the wedding planner $5,000. I owe Visa $8,000. We needed that money, Terrence. Terrence stared at the wall, his face a mask of defeat. I did not know, he muttered. I did not know he would do this. Suddenly, headlights swept across the front window. A car pulled into the driveway, a sleek, black sedan. The door opened and Arthur Banks stepped out. He looked like a savior descending from the heavens, dressed in a cashmere coat and a silk scarf. He walked up the path and pushed open the front door, stepping into the gloom. He looked around the empty room, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. He did not look shocked. He looked calculating. Well now, Arthur said, his voice smooth as oil. It looks like Jeremiah decided to play hardball. Arthur, Skylar cried, scrambling to her feet. He took everything. We have nothing. The house is empty. Arthur smiled, a predatory grin that was hidden by the shadows. Now, don't panic. It is just furniture. Things can be replaced. But you still have the most important thing. What? Terrence asked, looking up. You have the house, Arthur said, spreading his arms wide. Look at this place. It is prime real estate. The market is hot right now. You are sitting on a gold mine. But we can't sell it, Terrence said. Mom wants to keep it in the family. Who said anything about selling? Arthur chuckled. I am talking about leverage, my boy. Leverage. This house is free and clear. Jeremiah paid off the mortgage years ago, the fool. That means there is $400,000 of equity sitting right here in these walls. He walked over to Terrence and placed a hand on his shoulder. Listen to me. I have a business opportunity, a guaranteed investment. High-yield diamonds from a mine in Sierra Leone. I usually only let accredited investors in, but because you are family now, I can make an exception. Skylar stopped crying. She looked at Arthur, her eyes gleaming with greed. How much can we get? Arthur did the math in his head. If we take out a home equity line of credit, we could pull out maybe $250,000 immediately. You could furnish this place like a palace, pay off your little debts, and invest the rest with me. In 6 months, you will double your money. Terrence hesitated. But the house is in Mom's name. Loretta will do whatever I say, Arthur said dismissively. She trusts me, and she wants you to be happy, Terrence. She wants you to be successful, not like your father. The mention of me was the final push Terrence needed. He stood up, brushing the dust off his pants. You were right. Dad held onto this house like a prison. He never used the money, he just sat on it. Exactly, Arthur said. Money is meant to move. So, what do you say? Shall we turn this empty box into a fortune? Terrence looked at Skylar. She nodded vigorously, already imagining the shopping spree. Let's do it, Terrence said. Arthur clapped his hands together. Excellent. I will have my lawyer draw up the papers in the morning. We will get a private lender. Banks take too long. I know a guy who can get us cash in 48 hours. The interest is a little higher, but the returns on the investment will cover it easily. They stood there in the dark, empty house, shaking hands on a deal that was essentially signing their own death warrant. They thought Arthur was their savior. They did not know he was drowning in debt himself, that he needed fresh capital to pay off the angry investors from his last scam. They did not know that the diamond mine did not exist. And they certainly did not know that the private lender Arthur was going to call, the shadowy figure who bought up high-risk mortgages, was a shell company owned by a trust in Lisbon, owned by me. I boarded my flight, settling into the wide leather seat. The engines roared to life. I closed my eyes and pictured the house on Elm Street. I saw the three of them standing in the dark, plotting to burn down the only shelter they had. They were about to mortgage the roof over their heads to buy magic beans from a wolf, and I would be the one holding the deed. Sleep tight on the floor, son, I whispered to myself as the plane accelerated down the runway, because the ground is about to get a lot harder. The Atlantic breeze off the coast of Portugal tasted different than the air in New York. It tasted like salt and old money. I stood on the terrace of my villa in Cascais, looking out over the red tile roofs toward the shimmering blue ocean. I was wearing a linen shirt that cost more than the suits I used to wear to church, and in my hand was a glass of vintage port from 1963. It was smooth, rich, and complex, much like the life I had been secretly building for decades, while my family thought I was counting coupons for canned beans. This villa was not a rental. I had bought it 10 years ago through a shell corporation. It had 5 bedrooms, an infinity pool that seemed to drop straight into the sea, and a staff that knew me as Mr. Brooks, the quiet American investor. To Loretta and Terrence, I was a retired railway engineer who complained about the price of heating oil. To the banking community in Lisbon, I was a man of significant means. The contrast was almost funny. Back home, my son was likely sleeping on a hardwood floor because I had sold the bed out from under him. Here, I slept on Egyptian cotton sheets in a room that smelled of lavender and sea salt. I took a sip of the wine and felt the warmth spread through my chest. I was free. But freedom did not mean I had stopped watching. I had eyes everywhere. My private investigator, a man named Silva, who operated out of a nondescript office in Boston, sent me daily updates. And the report that had just landed in my encrypted inbox painted a picture of desperation and greed that was even pathetic than I had anticipated. Back in the United States, the reality of the empty house was setting in, but Arthur Banks was working his magic. He was a master of the illusion. He knew that when people are desperate, they do not look for the truth. They look for a lifeline. And he was dangling a very shiny, very fake lifeline in front of my ex-wife. The report detailed a meeting that had taken place that very afternoon at a high-end bistro. Arthur had arrived in a Bentley Continental. It was a beautiful car. It was also a rental, leased by the day at an exorbitant rate, but Loretta did not know that. She only saw the leather seats and the winged bee on the hood. She saw the gold Rolex on his wrist, which flashed every time he gestured. I knew from Silva's background check that the watch was a high-quality replica from Canal Street, but to Loretta, it looked like success. Arthur was playing the part of the stressed billionaire perfectly. He sat across from Loretta, holding her hand, looking deep into her eyes with a practiced intensity. He told her a story about a shipment of uncut diamonds from Sierra Leone that was currently stuck in customs. He said the potential profit was in the millions, but he was temporarily illiquid. His assets were tied up in offshore accounts that were undergoing a routine audit. He used big financial words that sounded impressive but meant absolutely nothing. Loretta, dazzled by the car and the watch and the promise of a life of luxury, ate it up. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him because the alternative was admitting that she had left a stable, honest man for a con artist. Arthur told her he needed a bridge loan, just $200,000 to pay the customs fees and release the diamonds. He said he couldn't use his own banks because of the audit. He needed a private infusion of cash. And because they were going to be married, because they were partners in this grand adventure, he wanted her to be the one to save the day. Loretta hesitated. She did not have $200,000. The divorce settlement had given her the house and half my pension, but not a lump sum of cash. That was when Arthur brought up the house on Elm Street. "It is simple, my love," he had told her, stroking her hand. "The house is free and clear. We take out a short-term private mortgage, hard money, fast cash. We pay the fees, release the diamonds, and I pay off the loan in 2 weeks with interest. You will make $20,000 just for signing a piece of paper. It is the easiest money you will ever make." He made it sound like a favor to her. He made her feel smart, sophisticated, part of the inner circle of high finance. He played on her vanity. He told her she was a natural businesswoman. Loretta, who had never balanced a checkbook in her life without complaining, preened under the praise. She signed. She signed a document that put a lien on the only asset she owned. The loan was from a private lending company with predatory interest rates and a clause that allowed for immediate foreclosure if a single payment was missed. She effectively gambled the roof over her head on a box of imaginary diamonds. She walked out of that bistro feeling like a queen, getting into the passenger seat of a rented Bentley, completely unaware that she had just signed her own eviction notice. But the infection of greed did not stop with Loretta. It had spread to my son and his wife. The report from Silva shifted focus to Terrence and Skylar. They were staying in the empty house, sleeping on an air mattress they had bought at a discount store. The romance of the inheritance had faded quickly when faced with the reality of no furniture and no money. Skylar was in a panic. She had debts that were coming due, and the furniture sale she had counted on was gone. She saw Arthur Banks not just as her mother-in-law's boyfriend, but as the patriarch she wished she had. She saw the Bentley. She saw the suits. She saw a man who threw money around, unlike me. She cornered Terrence in the empty kitchen. They were eating takeout pizza on the floor. "We need to get in on this," Skylar told him. Her eyes were wide and frantic. "Arthur is making deals worth millions. He is going to be your new father. He is going to be the grandfather to our children. We need to show him we are serious. We need to show him we have skin in the game." Terrence looked defeated. "We do not have any money, Skylar. You know that. We have the college fund," she said. Terrence choked on his pizza. "That is $50,000, Skylar. That is for the baby. We promised we would never touch it. It took us 5 years to save that." It wasn't entirely true that they had saved it. I had matched every dollar they put in. It was the only financial discipline Terrence had ever shown, and only because I insisted on it. "Do not be stupid, Terrence," Skylar snapped. $50,000 sitting in a savings account earning 1% interest is useless. Inflation is eating it alive. If we give it to Arthur to invest in this diamond deal, he could triple it in a month. He likes you, Terrence. He told me he sees potential in you, but you have to step up. You have to be a man of action, like him. Not like your father who hoarded every penny until he died alone. She knew exactly which buttons to push. She attacked his manhood. She compared him to me, the man he was desperate to outshine. She dangled the approval of the flashy new father figure in front of him. "But it is for the baby," Terrence whispered weakly. "This is for the baby," Skylar insisted. "Imagine if we could turn that 50,000 into 150,000. We could buy furniture. We could pay off my cards. We could buy a new car. We would be set. Arthur is doing this for us because we are family. Do not insult him by being cheap. Do not be a coward." Terrence broke. I could imagine him slumping his shoulders, the fight draining out of him. He was weak. He had always been weak because I had protected him too much. I had sheltered him from the consequences of his bad decisions, and now he was about to make the worst decision of his life without me there to stop him. They went to the bank the next morning. Silva had photos of them entering the branch. Terrence looked pale and sweaty. Skylar looked triumphant. They withdrew the entire $50,000 in a cashier's check made out to Arthur Banks. The teller, a woman who had known me for years, apparently tried to warn them. She asked if they were sure. She asked if they were aware of the penalties for withdrawing from the education fund. Skylar told her to mind her own business. She told the teller that they were making a high-level investment and that small-minded people wouldn't understand. They handed the check to Arthur that evening. He took it with a solemn nod, clapping Terrence on the back. "You are making a smart move, son," Arthur told him. "Welcome to the big leagues." I sat on my terrace in Lisbon, reading the report on my tablet. The sun was setting, turning the ocean a deep, bruised purple. I felt a cold anger in my gut. Not because they had lost the money. Money comes and goes. But because they had stolen from the next generation. They had raided an innocent child's future to pay for their own greed and stupidity. That $50,000 was supposed to be a shield for my grandchild. Now, it was just fuel for a con man's gas tank. My phone buzzed. It was Silva calling. "Mr. Brooks," Silva said. His voice was crisp and professional. "The transaction is complete. The private lending company that issued the mortgage to your ex-wife is looking to offload the note. They consider it high risk because of her lack of income history. They want to sell the debt at a discount to get quick liquidity." I swirled the wine in my glass. Of course they do. Arthur probably set up the loan with a shark who wants a quick turnover. Who is the lender? "A shell company out of Delaware," Silva said. "But they are just middlemen. They are looking for a buyer for the paper." "Buy it," I said. "Sir?" "Buy the mortgage," I repeated. "Use the holding company in the Cayman Islands. The one with the name that cannot be traced back to me. Buy the note on the house. Buy the debt." "I understand," Silva said. "And once we own the debt?" "Once we own the debt, we enforce the terms," I said. "Strictly. If she misses a payment by 1 minute, if she fails to maintain insurance, if she violates a single clause of that contract, we foreclose." "And the loan Arthur took from Terrence?" Silva asked. "Is there anything we can do about that?" "No," I said. "That money is gone. Arthur will spend it on dinners and suits and paying off the last widow he scammed. Terrence needs to learn that lesson the hard way. But the house? The house is different. That house was my life's work. And now, I am going to be the bank." I authorized the transfer of funds. Within an hour, I was the legal owner of the mortgage on 142 Elm Street. I was the invisible hand holding the roof over Loretta's head. She thought she had signed a deal with a stranger. She thought she was free of me. She did not know that every time she walked through the front door, she was walking into a trap that I had just snapped shut. I finished my wine. The night air was cooling down. I wrapped my robe tighter around myself. I was thousands of miles away, but I felt closer to them than ever. I was no longer just the ex-husband or the disappointed father. I was the creditor. And creditors always get paid, one way or another. Arthur Banks thought he was the predator in this story. He thought he was the wolf in the henhouse. He did not realize that the farmer had come back with a shotgun, and he was aiming from the shadows. I went back inside the villa. I had a dinner reservation at a small seafood restaurant in the village. I was going to order the grilled octopus and a bottle of green wine. I was going to enjoy my life, and while I ate, I would wait for the first payment notification to bounce, because I knew Arthur. And I knew Loretta. They were too busy pretending to be rich to actually pay their bills. The clock was ticking, and I was the only one who could hear it. 3 months. That was all it took. 90 days after I signed the divorce papers and boarded a plane to Europe, my phone chimed with a notification that made me laugh out loud in the quiet of my Lisbon study. It was an email, not a card, not a phone call, but a mass email sent to a blind carbon copy list. The subject line read, "The Union of Loretta and Arthur, a celebration of true love." I opened it. It was a digital invitation to a wedding at the Royal Palms Resort, one of the most expensive venues in the state. The date was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks. Loretta was moving at the speed of light. I knew exactly why. She was terrified. She had mortgaged her house to give Arthur money, and she needed to lock him down legally before the house of cards collapsed. She needed that marriage license to secure her claim on his imaginary fortune. She was rushing to the altar, not out of passion, but out of panic. The invitation was gaudy. It had animated doves and gold font that was hard to read. It boasted a 5-course meal, an open bar with top-shelf liquor, and a live orchestra. I did the math in my head. A wedding like that at the Royal Palms would cost $80,000 minimum. Loretta didn't have $80,000. Arthur didn't have $80,000. They were putting this entire charade on credit, likely using the cards Skylar had bullied Terrence into maxing out, or perhaps Arthur had found another vendor he could charm into waiting for payment. I sat back in my leather chair, looking out at the Atlantic Ocean. The sun was shining on the water, turning it into a sheet of diamonds that were actually real, unlike the ones Arthur was supposedly importing. I took a sip of espresso. They were throwing a party they couldn't afford to celebrate a marriage based on lies. It was perfect. It was a disaster waiting to happen, and they had just sent me a front row ticket. But they didn't want me there. They just wanted me to know. They wanted to rub my nose in it. They wanted the old, dusty engineer to see that his wife had upgraded to a man of the world. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video call request. It was Terrence. I hesitated. I looked around my study. It was filled with Portuguese art, expensive rugs, and the kind of furniture you see in architectural magazines. If I answered, he would see everything. He would see that his father was not a broken man living in a hovel. He would see the wealth I had hidden. And I wasn't ready to show my hand, not yet. I grabbed my tablet and walked into the small utility closet off the kitchen, where the maid kept the cleaning supplies. It was dim and cramped. The walls were plain white plaster. I sat on a step stool and messed up my hair. I loosened my collar to look disheveled. I put a look of exhaustion on my face. Then I accepted the call. Terrence's face filled the screen. He was flushed. He put down the deposit in cash. He is a man who knows how to treat a woman. I kept my face impassive. Is that so? I said. That is generous of him. He is not just generous, Dad, Terrence said, his voice taking on a nasty edge. He is wealthy. Real wealth. Not the pennies you scrape together. He is teaching me about business. He is going to make me a partner in his import firm. We are going to be rich, Dad. And you know what the best part is? He actually likes spending money. He is not like you. I nodded slowly. I am glad you found a father figure who matches your values, Terrence. Skylar leaned in, her face crowding the screen. She looked like a shark smelling blood. We just wanted to call and tell you not to bother coming back for the wedding, Jeremiah. We know you got the email. It was a formality. We don't want you there. You would just embarrass everyone with your cheap suit and your sad stories. This is a high-class event. We don't need a retired train conductor bringing down the vibe. I am not coming, Skylar, I said. I cannot afford the ticket. Skylar smirked. Good. Stay in your little hostel. But we called to tell you something else. Something important. She looked at Terrence. He nodded, puffing out his chest. We decided on a name for the baby, Terrence said. Or rather, we decided on a surname. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. What do you mean? When the baby is born, Skylar said, her voice dripping with satisfaction, we are not going to give him the name Brooks. That name is associated with poverty. It is associated with a man who abandoned his family to go live in a closet in Europe. We want our son to have a legacy, a name that opens doors. So, Terrence continued, looking me dead in the eye, we are going to name him Arthur, and we are changing our last name to Banks. Arthur offered to adopt me as his adult son. He wants to carry on his line. He has no children of his own. So, your grandson will be Arthur Banks II. The silence that followed was heavy. They watched me, waiting for the explosion. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to beg. In our community, the family name is everything. It is the history. It is the bloodline. To erase my name from my grandson was the ultimate insult. It was a declaration of war. They were trying to wipe me out of existence. I looked at my son. I saw the weakness in his jaw, the greed in his eyes. He was willing to sell his own identity for a promise of gold from a con man. He was willing to disrespect his father, his grandfather, and every Brooks who had come before him, just to drive a car he didn't own and wear a watch that didn't work. I took a breath. It was a long, slow breath. I did not give them the anger they craved. I gave them ice. That is your choice, I said. My voice was flat. If you think the name Banks carries more value than the name Brooks, then take it. But remember this, Terrence. A name is only as good as the man who wears it. And paper burns. Terrence frowned, confused by my lack of reaction. You are not even mad. You don't even care. That proves it. You never cared about us. Arthur cares. Arthur is a king. You are just a peasant, Dad. Enjoy your hostel. Skylar laughed. Goodbye, Jeremiah. Don't worry about sending a gift. We know you can't afford anything we would want. The screen went black. They hung up. I sat in the dark closet for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I felt a single tear trace a path down my cheek. It wasn't for me. It was for the baby. My grandson. A child who was going to be born into a nest of vipers, carrying the name of a thief. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked out of the closet. I went back to my study and sat at my mahogany desk. I opened my laptop. The anger was gone. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. They wanted to play games with legacy. They wanted to talk about value. Fine. I would show them the true cost of things. I called Mr. Goldstein. It was late in New York, but I knew he would be awake. He answered on the first ring. "Jeremiah," Goldstein said, "what is the play?" "They are having a wedding," I said, "at the Royal Palms, 2 weeks from Saturday." "I saw the announcement," Goldstein said. "Very flashy." "I want to send a gift," I said. "A gift?" Goldstein asked, sounding surprised. "You want to send them money?" "No," I said. "I want to send them a reality check. I want you to contact the holding company that owns the Royal Palms Resort. We have done business with their parent corporation before." "Yes, we have," Goldstein said slowly. "I want to know the status of the bill for the Banks-Brooks wedding," I said. "Hold on." I heard the clicking of keys. A minute passed. "Here it is," Goldstein said. "The bill is estimated at $85,000. They paid a $5,000 deposit. The rest is due at the conclusion of the event. The contract is signed by Arthur Banks, but it is guaranteed by a credit card in the name of Skylar Vance." "Skylar," I said. "She put her name on the line." "Of course she did. Arthur convinced her it was just a formality." "I want you to buy the debt," I said. "The wedding debt?" Goldstein asked. "Not just the wedding debt," I said. "I want you to buy every debt Arthur Banks has in that city. The car lease, the outstanding balance at the jewelry store where he rented Loretta's necklace. Buy it all, consolidate it, and then I want you to hire a process server, a loud one." "You want him served at the wedding," Goldstein realized. "I want him served during the cake cutting," I said. "I want the server to walk up to the head table and hand them the bill for their entire fake life. And I want you to enforce the immediate payment clause on the wedding venue contract. If they cannot pay the balance in full the moment the event ends, I want the hotel to lock the doors and call the police for theft of services." "That is aggressive, Jeremiah," Goldstein said. "That is scorched earth." "They are changing my grandson's name," I said. "They are erasing me. So I am going to erase their fantasy." "Understood," Goldstein said. His voice hardened. "I will make the arrangements. The process server will be there. And one more thing," I added. "Get me a live feed. I want to see it. I want to see Arthur's face when he realizes the check has bounced." "Consider it done." I hung up the phone. I walked out onto the terrace. The night was cool. I looked up at the moon. Back in America, Arthur Banks was probably laughing. He was probably toasting to his own genius, thinking he had found the perfect victims. He was celebrating a victory that hadn't happened yet. He did not know that the ground beneath his feet had already been sold. He did not know that the man he called a peasant owned the castle. I raised my glass to the empty ocean. "To the happy couple," I whispered, "may you get exactly what you deserve." The trap was set. The invitation had been accepted, and the gift I was sending was going to be unforgettable. They wanted a show. They wanted glamour. I was going to give them a spectacle they would talk about for years. The dismantling of a lie, live and in color. I went back inside and poured another glass of wine. I had 2 weeks to wait. It was going to be the longest 2 weeks of my life, but patience was a virtue I had mastered. I was an engineer. I knew how to build pressure until the explosion was inevitable, and this explosion was going to be magnificent. The Royal Palms ballroom looked like the inside of a jewelry box that had been shaken too hard. From the high-definition screen of my laptop in Lisbon, the scene was almost blinding. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a prismatic glow over 300 guests. There were towers of white roses on every table, imported out of season at a cost that could have fed a small village for a month. The champagne flowed like water from a broken main. It was a spectacle of excess, a masterclass in spending money you do not have to impress people you do not like. Arthur Banks sat at the head table like a monarch surveying his kingdom. He was wearing a white tuxedo jacket with black lapels, a look that screamed old Hollywood glamour, but whispered rental shop polyester. On his wrist, the fake gold Rolex caught the light every time he raised his glass. Next to him sat Loretta. My ex-wife looked radiant. I had to admit that. She was wearing a designer gown that clung to her in all the right places. It was a Vera Wang. I knew this because Silva, my private investigator, had sent me the invoice from the bridal boutique where she had put it on a payment plan with 20% interest. She looked happy. She looked like a woman who believed she had won the lottery. She was laughing at something Arthur whispered in her ear, completely unaware that the diamonds around her neck were rented by the hour and had to be returned by midnight or she would be charged a late fee she could not afford. Skylar was working the room like a politician running for office. She wore a dress that sparkled with every step, dragging a reluctant Terrence behind her. I watched her through the hidden camera feed, which was positioned discreetly near the DJ booth. She was introducing Arthur to her distant relatives, pointing at him with a proprietary air. I could practically read her lips. She was saying things like billionaire and international business and upgrade. She was selling the fantasy harder than Arthur was. She needed this to be real. She needed the guests to envy her. She needed to believe that destroying our family was worth it, because look at the open bar. Look at the shrimp tower. Look at the proximity to wealth. The camera panned to Terrence. My son looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo. It was too tight around the neck, and he kept tugging at his collar. He was sweating. He had already visited the bar 4 times in the last hour. I knew the signs. Terrence drank when he was nervous. He drank when he felt out of place. And right now, surrounded by a level of luxury he had never earned, he looked like a man drowning on dry land. But Skylar kept whispering in his ear, pushing him forward, molding him into the son of a tycoon. The music lowered, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center of the dance floor. The master of ceremonies, a man with a voice like melted butter, announced that it was time for the toasts. My stomach tightened. This was the moment. Arthur stood up first. He gave a speech that was smooth, charming, and completely hollow. He talked about destiny. He talked about soulmates. He talked about how money means nothing without love, which was rich, coming from a man who had embezzled the retirement funds of half the church choir. The guests applauded politely. They were dazzled by the show. They did not see the shark beneath the suit. Then, Arthur sat down and gestured to Terrence. The spotlight swung to my son. He stood up, swaying slightly. He held a microphone in one hand and a glass of scotch in the other. He looked out at the sea of faces. He looked terrified. Then he looked at Skylar. She nodded at him, her eyes hard and demanding. "Do it," her eyes said. "Secure the legacy." Terrence cleared his throat. The feedback from the microphone screeched, making the guests wince. "Hello, everyone," Terrence said, his voice slurring just a fraction. "For those who do not know me, I am Terrence. Loretta is my mother. And Arthur is, well, Arthur is the man of the hour." He paused, taking a long drink from his glass. The room was silent. "I grew up in a different kind of house," Terrence continued. "A quiet house. A house where we turned off the lights when we left a room. A house where we saved wrapping paper to use again next year. My biological father, Jeremiah, he was a simple man. He worked on the trains. He came home with dirt under his fingernails. He taught me that life was about hard work and saving pennies." He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "But you know what saving pennies gets you? It gets you a boring life. It gets you a small life. I spent 30 years watching my father count coins while the world passed us by. I thought that was all there was. I thought being a man meant being small." He turned to look at Arthur. Arthur beamed back at him, the benevolent king. "Then I met Arthur," Terrence said, his voice gaining strength, fueled by the alcohol and the resentment he had nursed for years. "Arthur taught me that a man provides. A real man does not hoard. A real man builds an empire. Arthur showed me what generosity looks like. He welcomed me and my wife Skylar into his world without hesitation. He did not ask us to work for it. He just gave, because that is what a father does." The guests murmured in approval. What a touching sentiment. What a loving tribute. Terrence looked directly into the camera lens of the videographer, which meant he was looking directly at me on my screen in Lisbon. His eyes were wet and angry. "My biological father is just a miserly failure," Terrence spat the words out. "He ran away to Europe because he could not handle seeing my mother happy. He could not handle seeing us succeed. He is a coward. But Arthur is a good, wealthy man. He is the father I always wanted. He is the grandfather my son deserves." He raised his glass high. "So here is to Arthur Banks, the best man I know. And here is to the name Banks. May it bring us the fortune and respect that the name Brooks never could. To the future. The room erupted. People cheered. They stood up and clapped. Loretta was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, overcome with emotion. Skylar was beaming, clapping so hard her bracelets jangled. Arthur looked smug, soaking in the adoration he had purchased with stolen money. I sat in my study in Lisbon. The silence in the room was absolute. I did not move. I did not blink. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the final death of hope. Until that moment, a small, foolish part of me had hoped Terrence would hesitate. I hoped he would remember the fishing trips. I hoped he would remember the nights I sat up with him when he was sick. I hoped he would remember that I paid for his first car, his college, his wedding to Skylar. But he remembered nothing. He only saw the flash of gold and the promise of easy living. He had called me a failure. He had called me a coward. He had publicly disowned me for a con man. I looked at the frozen image on my screen. Terrence drinking his scotch, Loretta kissing Arthur, Skylar looking triumphant. They were celebrating their victory over me. They thought I was thousands of miles away, powerless and broken. I reached for my tea. It was cold. I took a sip anyway. The sound was a sharp click in the quiet room. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. On the screen, the party continued. The band started playing a slow jazz number. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. Arthur stood up to cut the cake. It was a massive, 6-tier confection decorated with edible gold leaf, another expense they could not afford. Loretta stood beside him, holding the knife. They looked like royalty. Then, the double doors at the back of the ballroom opened. It was not a waiter. It was not a guest. It was a man in a cheap gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He did not look like he belonged at a black tie gala. He looked like exactly what he was, a process server, a man who delivered bad news for a living. He walked past the security guard who tried to stop him. The man flashed a badge and kept walking. He moved with a singular purpose, cutting through the dance floor like an icebreaker ship through a frozen sea. The guests parted ways, confused. The music faltered as the band members noticed the intrusion. Skylar saw him first. Her smile faltered. She stepped forward to intercept him, her instincts as a social climber kicking in. This was not part of the script. This was an interruption. "Excuse me," Skylar said, putting a hand on the man's arm. "This is a private event. You need to leave." The man did not even look at her. He brushed past her as if she were a piece of furniture. He walked straight up to the head table, where Arthur and Loretta were holding the cake knife. Arthur looked up. His smile froze. He recognized the look of a man who brought consequences. He dropped the knife. It clattered onto the china plate, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the room. The man stopped in front of the table. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers bound with a red rubber band. He looked at Arthur Banks. "Arthur Banks," the man said. His voice was loud, flat, and carried to every corner of the room. Arthur tried to laugh it off. "Not now, my good man. We are in the middle of a toast. Whatever it is, call my office on Monday." The man slapped the papers onto the table, right next to the wedding cake. The force of it made the champagne glasses jump. "You are served," the man said. Loretta looked at the papers, then at Arthur. "What is this, Arthur? What is going on?" "It is nothing," Arthur hissed, his face turning pale. "Just a misunderstanding, a business dispute, security. Get this man out of here." The man reached into his bag again. He pulled out a second stack of papers. "Loretta Brooks," the man said. "Or is it Banks now? It does not matter. The debt is joint." He dropped the second stack in front of her. "And Terrence Brooks," the man continued, turning to my son who was still holding his microphone. "And Skylar Brooks." He walked over to them and handed them each a heavy envelope. "You are all served," the man announced to the room. "Served for what?" Skylar shrieked, snatching the envelope. "For fraud, theft of services, and default on secured loans," the man said. "And by the way," he looked at Arthur, who was staring at the papers as if they were venomous snakes, and then he turned his gaze to Loretta. My ex-wife was trembling. Her hands were shaking so badly that she dropped the cake knife. It clattered against the china, a sharp, jarring sound that echoed through the stunned ballroom. She looked at the man, her eyes wide with confusion and rising panic. She did not understand. She thought this was a mistake. She thought this was just a rude interruption that Arthur would fix with a phone call and a wave of his hand. The man took a step closer to her. He was now invading her personal space, standing right next to the microphone that Terrence had abandoned on the table. The little green light on the mic was still glowing. The man knew it. I watched from my screen in Lisbon as he leaned in close to Loretta's ear, but he did not whisper. He spoke in a low, clear voice that was amplified by the sound system, carrying to every single corner of the room. "Congratulations on your nuptials, Mrs. Banks," the man said. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was just a statement of fact. "It is a beautiful ceremony. I hope you enjoyed it, because I need to inform you of the law in this state. You see, when you married Mr. Banks 5 minutes ago, you also married his financial liabilities. In this jurisdiction, the debt of the husband becomes the burden of the wife." Loretta blinked. "What are you talking about?" she stammered into the silence. "Arthur is wealthy. He has millions." The man ignored her. He continued speaking to the room. "The mortgage you signed 3 months ago, Mrs. Banks. The one secured against the property at 142 Elm Street. The one you took out to fund Mr. Banks's business ventures. That loan is in default. The private lender has exercised their right to accelerate the debt." Loretta looked at Arthur. Arthur refused to meet her eyes. He was busy looking at the exit signs. "Because you failed to make the first 3 payments," the man said, his voice booming over the speakers. "The lender has moved to seize the collateral. As of 5 minutes ago, while you were saying your vows, a foreclosure notice was posted on the front door of your home. Your house has been sealed. The locks have been changed. You are homeless, Mrs. Banks." The words hung in the air like smoke. Homeless. The house I had paid for. The house I had maintained. The house I had given her in the divorce so she would be safe. She had gambled it away on a lie, and now she had lost it. Loretta let out a sound that was not quite human. It was a high-pitched keen of pure terror. She grabbed the lapels of Arthur's white tuxedo jacket and shook him. "Tell him he is lying, Arthur," she screamed. Her face was twisted and ugly with fear. "Tell him you paid it. You told me you paid it. You said the money was coming from Switzerland. You said we were safe." Arthur tried to pry her hands off him. "Loretta, calm down," he hissed, his voice rising in panic. "It is a banking error. I will call my guys in Zurich. We will sort this out on Monday. Just let go of me. You are wrinkling the suit." "Wrinkling the suit," Loretta shrieked. She slapped him. It was a solid, meaty slap that rocked his head back. "You liar. You told me you were rich. You told me you were a tycoon. Where is my house, Arthur? Where is my money?" The chaos broke the spell in the room. The guests began to murmur, the sound rising like a wave. Phones were out. Everyone was recording. This was better than the wedding. This was a train wreck. Arthur realized he had lost control of the narrative. He realized that the woman holding on to him was not a trophy anymore, but an anchor dragging him down. He looked at the security guards near the entrance. They were not moving to help him. They were watching, arms crossed. They worked for the hotel, and the hotel knew the bill hadn't been paid. Arthur shoved Loretta away. She stumbled back, knocking over the wedding cake. The massive, 6-tier confection crashed to the floor in an explosion of fondant and sponge. White frosting splattered onto Loretta's Vera Wang gown, ruining it instantly. Arthur did not stop to help her. He turned and sprinted toward the side exit, the one leading to the kitchen. He was surprisingly fast for a man of 72. He vaulted over a chair and made a break for the door. He did not make it. 2 large men in dark suits stepped out from the kitchen doorway, blocking his path. They were not hotel security. They were private contractors I had hired through Goldstein. They were there to ensure that the guest of honor did not leave the party early. Arthur skidded to a halt, looking left and right like a trapped rat. He turned back toward the room, his eyes wild. "Let me pass," Arthur shouted, trying to muster some authority. "I am a VIP. I am the groom. You are a flight risk," one of the men said calmly, "and nobody leaves until the bill is settled." While Arthur was being corralled back toward the dance floor, Skylar decided it was her moment to shine. My daughter-in-law had watched the scene unfold with a look of horror that was quickly replaced by a blind, irrational rage. She could not accept that her fantasy was dying. She refused to believe that the golden ticket she had married into was fake. She hiked up her expensive dress and stormed onto the stage, marching straight for the process server who was still standing by the table, watching the chaos with a professional detachment. Skylar grabbed the microphone stand and shoved it aside. She got right in the man's face. "Who paid you to do this?" she screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. Was it Jeremiah? Was it that bitter old man? This is slander, do you hear me? This is defamation of character. She turned to the crowd, spreading her arms wide. Listen to me, everyone. This man is a paid actor. This is a prank. My father-in-law, Arthur Banks, is a man of immense wealth. He is a pillar of the community. He owns diamond mines. He owns real estate. This piece of trash is just trying to ruin our moment because he is jealous. She turned back to the man and poked him in the chest with a manicured finger. Get out of here before I call the police, she spat. You have no idea who you are dealing with. We are the Banks family. We have lawyers who will eat you alive. The man looked down at her finger on his chest. He did not blink. He slowly reached into his briefcase again. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout, a rap sheet. I know exactly who I am dealing with, Mrs. Brooks, the man said. He held the paper up so the nearest tables could see it. I am dealing with Arthur Nathaniel Banks, also known as Artie the Shark, also known as Nathaniel Green. He has served time in 3 different states for fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny. He was released from federal prison 2 years ago on parole. Skylar froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. He does not own a diamond mine, the man continued, his voice relentless. He does not own real estate. The car he arrived in is a daily rental that is 3 days overdue. The watch on his wrist is a counterfeit worth maybe $50, and the investment fund he sold your husband into, the one you drained your child's college fund for, it does not exist. It is a personal checking account in the Cayman Islands that currently has a balance of 0 because he spent it all on this party. Skylar took a step back, shaking her head. No, she whispered. No, that is not true. We gave him $50,000. He doubled it. He showed us the statement. He showed you a Photoshop file, the man said. The money is gone, Skylar. Your husband's money. Your money. It is gone. Skylar looked across the room at Terrence. My son was sitting on the edge of the stage, his head in his hands, weeping. He had heard every word. He knew it was true. The $50,000 was gone. The inheritance was gone. The dream was gone. But the man wasn't finished with Skylar. He had one more piece of paper. He pulled out a small thermal receipt slip, the kind that comes out of a credit card machine. And speaking of money, the man said, looking at Skylar, the hotel management asked me to give you this. They ran the card you put on file this morning, the card that was supposed to guarantee the final balance of $85,000 for this wedding. He held out the slip. It declined, Skylar. Skylar stared at the slip of paper. It fluttered in the air conditioning. Insufficient funds, the man read aloud. The card is maxed out, which means this party is not paid for, which means you, as the guarantor, are personally liable for the theft of services. Skylar snatched the receipt. She looked at it. She looked at the red letters that spelled out, declined. No, she gasped. That card has a limit of $20,000. It should have at least covered the deposit. The total bill is $85,000, the man reminded her. And even if you had $20,000, it wouldn't be enough. But you don't have $20,000. You have nothing. Skylar looked around the room. The guests were staring at her. The envy she had cultivated all night had turned into pity and disgust. She saw her friends whispering. She saw her cousins shaking their heads. She saw the social ladder she had climbed so desperately crumbling beneath her feet. She looked at Arthur, who was arguing with the security guards. She looked at Loretta, who was sitting on the floor in a puddle of cake and frosting, sobbing into her ruined dress. She looked at Terrence, who was broken, and then she screamed. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. She threw the receipt at the man and lunged for him, her nails aiming for his face. You ruined everything, she shrieked. You ruined my life. The man stepped aside effortlessly. Skylar tripped on her gown and fell hard onto the dance floor. She lay there, panting, humiliated, surrounded by the wreckage of her own greed. I watched from Lisbon, my heart beating steady and slow. It was brutal. It was ugly, and it was exactly what they needed. They had built a castle on a swamp and were surprised when it sank. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the murmurs of the crowd. It came from outside, getting louder and closer. It was a sound I knew well from my days working in the city. The wail of sirens. Blue and red lights began to flash against the high windows of the ballroom, strobing in time with the panic in the room. The police were here. The man in the gray suit closed his briefcase. His job was done. He looked at the camera lens one last time, giving a small, almost imperceptible nod to the invisible audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the room, "I suggest you clear the area. This is now a crime scene." The guests didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed their purses and their coats and stampeded for the exits, leaving the Banks-Brooks family alone in the center of the empty dance floor, waiting for the handcuffs. The ballroom doors did not just open, they burst inward as if hit by a battering ram. A dozen uniformed officers flooded into the space, their boots thudding heavily against the polished parquet floor. The flashing blue and red lights from the patrol cars outside washed over the room, turning the spilled wedding cake and the ruined decorations into a grotesque, strobe-lit nightmare. I watched from my screen in Lisbon, leaning closer, my coffee forgotten on the desk. This was the crescendo. This was the moment gravity finally took hold. Arthur Banks saw them coming. For a split second, the facade of the wealthy tycoon flickered and died, replaced by the cornered animal instinct of a career criminal. He tried to scramble backward over the head table, knocking over crystal glasses and half-empty champagne bottles, but he was not fast enough. Two officers were on him instantly. One grabbed his left arm, twisting it behind his back with a force that made Arthur yelp in pain. The other shoved his face down onto the white tablecloth, right into the remains of the shrimp cocktail. Loretta screamed. It was a sound of pure denial. She lunged at the police officer, grabbing his shoulder. "What are you doing? Get off him! Do you know who he is? He is a respected businessman. He is my husband." The officer spun around, his hand resting on his taser. "Ma'am, step back. This man is under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Step back or you will be charged with obstruction." Loretta froze, her hands hovering in the air. She looked down at Arthur, whose face was pressed against the table, his cheek squashed against a linen napkin. "Arthur," she pleaded, her voice trembling, Tell them it is a mistake. Call your lawyers in Zurich." Arthur let out a laugh that sounded like gravel grinding together. He turned his head sideways to look at her. The charm was gone. The warmth was gone. His eyes were dead and cold, filled with a profound annoyance. "There are no lawyers in Zurich, Loretta," Arthur spat. "You stupid, desperate old cow." Loretta recoiled as if he had slapped her. "What?" "I said you are a cow," Arthur growled, as the officers hauled him upright and snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists. "You were the easiest mark I have ever played. You were so desperate to believe you were special, so desperate to believe you deserved a billionaire. I did not even have to try hard. I just rented a car and smiled, and you handed me the keys to your life." "No," Loretta whispered, shaking her head. "You love me. We just got married." "I married your credit score, Loretta," Arthur sneered. "I married the equity in your house. But thanks to your ex-husband, that house is worthless to me now. You are dry. You have nothing left to give me. So do me a favor and stop crying. You are ruining the makeup I paid for with your son's money." The brutality of his words silenced the room. Even the police officers seemed to pause for a second, disgusted by the sheer venom in his voice. Loretta stood there, the blood draining from her face, looking like a statue of grief. The man she had left me for, the man she had mortgaged her future for, had just peeled off his skin to reveal the monster underneath. She looked at me, or rather, she looked at the camera lens that represented me, her eyes wide and hollow. She realized in that shattering moment that she had traded a diamond for a piece of broken glass. But the carnage was not over. Terence, who had been sitting on the edge of the stage in a stupor, suddenly scrambled to his feet. The words Arthur had spoken seemed to penetrate the fog of alcohol and self-pity in his brain. "Your son's money," the phrase echoed in the empty ballroom. Terence ran toward Arthur, stumbling over the train of Loretta's dress. He grabbed the lapels of Arthur's jacket, shaking him. "What did you say?" Terence shouted, his voice cracking. "What about my money? The $50,000. You said it was in an investment account. You showed me the app on your phone." Arthur looked at Terence with a sneer of pure disdain. He did not look like a father figure anymore. He looked like a wolf looking at a sheep. "That was a demo app, you idiot," Arthur laughed right in his face. "It is fake numbers on a screen. Anyone can download it." "Where is the money?" Terence screamed, shaking him harder. "That was for my son. That was the college fund. Give it back." "It is gone, boy," Arthur said, leaning in close so Terrence could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. I spent it. I spent it on this tuxedo. I spent it on the deposit for the Bentley. I spent it on the first-class ticket to the Caymans that I was going to use tonight after you all went to sleep. Terrence let go of the jacket, stepping back as if burned. You spent it? Every dime, Arthur confirmed. Consider it a tuition fee, Terrence. You wanted to learn about business. Lesson 1. Never give your capital to a man who wears a rented watch. Terrence collapsed to his knees. He let out a wail that tore through the room, a sound of absolute ruin. $50,000, 5 years of savings, his child's future, vaporized in 3 weeks because he wanted to impress a man who despised him. Skylar had been standing off to the side, watching the scene unfold with a look of growing horror. But when she heard that the money was truly gone, that there was no investment, no profit, and no refund, something inside her snapped. The social climber, the woman who had meticulously planned her ascent, realized she had fallen off the ladder and landed in the mud. She turned her eyes to Terrence. He was on his knees, crying like a child. He looked weak. He looked pathetic. He was the man who had promised her the world and delivered nothing but debt. You lose, Skylar shrieked. She launched herself at him. She did not look like a blushing bride or a supportive wife. She looked like a fury. She began to hit him, slapping his head, punching his shoulders, her nails raking across his face. You lost it all, she screamed, punctuating every word with a blow. You stupid, useless man. I told you to check. I told you to be sure. You gave him our money. You gave him my baby's money. Terrence did not fight back. He just huddled on the floor, taking the beating, sobbing into his hands. It was a display of total dysfunction, a family destroying itself in real time. The police officers had to intervene, pulling Skylar off him. She thrashed and kicked, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. "Get off me," she yelled at the female officer restraining her. "Arrest him. Arrest my husband. He is an accessory. He stole my money too." "Calm down, ma'am," the officer said, wrestling Skylar's arms behind her back. "You need to calm down or you will be restrained." While the family was tearing each other apart, another figure stepped into the spotlight. It was the general manager of the Royal Palms Resort. He was a tall man with a clipboard and a face made of stone. He had watched the arrest, the confession, and the assault without blinking. He did not care about the drama. He had a bottom line to protect. He walked up to the chaotic group, stepping over the spilled cake. He signaled to the police officers to hold Arthur and Skylar for a moment. He looked at Loretta, who was still standing in shock, and then down at Terrence. "Excuse me," the manager said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Before anyone leaves this building, we have a matter to settle." Loretta looked at him, blinking slowly. "What?" "The bill," the manager said, tapping his clipboard. "The balance for this event is $85,000. The credit card on file has been declined. The check Mr. Banks provided yesterday has been flagged by the bank as fraudulent." He held out the invoice. It was a long piece of paper, detailing every bottle of champagne, every lobster tail, every flower. "I need payment in full," the manager said. "Right now, or I will be pressing charges for theft of services against every person who signed this contract. That includes you, Mr. Banks, you, Mrs. Banks, and you, Mr. Brooks." Loretta looked at the invoice. $85,000. She didn't have $85 in her purse. "I cannot pay," she whispered. "I have no money. He took it all." The manager looked at Terrence. "What about you, sir?" Terrence looked up from the floor, blood trickling from a scratch on his cheek. "I am broke," he said hollowly. "I have nothing." The manager sighed. He had expected this. He turned to the police sergeant in charge. "Officer," the manager said, "the Royal Palms wishes to press charges for theft of services against all 4 individuals. The amount exceeds the felony threshold. Please take them into custody." The sergeant nodded. "All right, folks, you heard the man. The party is over." He signaled his team. The officers moved in. They pulled Terrence to his feet and spun him around, clicking handcuffs onto his wrists. He did not resist. He looked like a man who had already died inside. They approached Loretta. She offered her hands meekly, tears streaming down her face, ruining the makeup she had spent hours applying. Arthur was already cuffed, watching the proceedings with a bored expression, as if this were just another Tuesday. But Skylar was not ready to go quietly. When the female officer reached for her wrist, Skylar's eyes darted to the side exit, the one the catering staff used. It was unguarded. "No," Skylar shouted. "I am not going to jail. I am not like them. I am a victim." She shoved the officer backward and bolted. She ran in her high heels, hitching up her dress, sprinting for the door. For a second, it looked like she might make it. She pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, knocking over a tray of dirty dishes that a waiter was holding. But she forgot one thing. The kitchen had a back exit that led to the loading dock, and the loading dock was swarming with the backup units the police had called in. I watched on the camera feed as Skylar disappeared into the kitchen, followed closely by 2 officers. A moment later, I heard a scream, followed by the sound of a struggle. Then, silence. 5 minutes later, the kitchen doors opened. 2 officers walked out, dragging Skylar between them. She was no longer fighting. She was limp, her hair a mess, her dress torn at the hem. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. She looked up at the camera, her eyes wild and terrified. She knew. In that moment, she knew I was watching. The police marched them all out. Arthur first, head held high, unrepentant. Then Loretta, sobbing, broken. Then Terrence, shuffling like a zombie. And finally Skylar, dragged along, staring into the abyss of her own making. They were loaded into the back of the patrol cars. The blue lights reflected off the windows of the resort, a harsh, unforgiving strobe. The manager stood on the steps, crossing the invoice off his list. I sat back in my chair in Lisbon. The screen showed an empty ballroom. The cake was on the floor. The flowers were wilting. The champagne was going flat. It was a scene of perfect devastation. I closed the laptop. The silence in my study was heavy, but it was peaceful. I had not raised a hand. I had not shouted. I had simply let them be exactly who they were, and the weight of their own choices had crushed them. They were going to jail. They had no money for bail. They had no lawyers, and the only person who could save them was sitting 4,000 miles away, pouring a second glass of vintage port. I took a sip. It tasted like victory, but it also tasted like a goodbye. The family I had built was gone. The son I had raised was gone. But I was still here, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow. 24 hours is an eternity when you are hungry. It is a lifetime when you are shivering in the front seat of a 10-year-old car with a flat tire, parked 2 blocks away from the house you used to call home. Loretta and Terrence had been released from police custody at dawn on Sunday morning. They were not charged with felonies yet, but they were persons of interest in the fraud investigation. Skylar was not so lucky. She was still in a cell, awaiting a bail hearing for assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. Arthur was in federal custody, probably negotiating a plea deal that would bury everyone else to save his own skin. But Loretta and Terrence were free, in the loosest sense of the word. They had walked out of the precinct into the cold morning air with nothing. Their wallets and phones had been returned, but their dignity was gone. They had taken a taxi to the house on Elm Street, the house the judge had awarded to Loretta, thinking they could at least shower and sleep. They found the driveway empty. They found the front door sealed with a heavy padlock and a bright orange notice taped to the wood at eye level. Foreclosure. Seized by the lender. Do not enter. Trespassers will be prosecuted, Loretta had screamed. She had pounded on the door until her knuckles bled. She had tried her key, but the locks had been drilled out and replaced. She realized then that the papers the process server had thrown at her were real. The house was gone. The sanctuary was gone. They had retreated to Terrence's car, which was parked down the street because he could not afford a tow truck. It was cramped. It smelled of stale fast food and despair. Loretta was still wearing her ruined Vera Wang wedding dress, the white silk stained with chocolate frosting and street grime. Terrence was in his tuxedo, his tie missing, his shirt unbuttoned, looking like a waiter who had been fired mid-shift. They had no money for a hotel. Their credit cards were frozen. They had no friends left to call because they had alienated everyone with their arrogance. They sat there as the sun rose, watching the neighborhood wake up. They saw the neighbors, people I had known for 40 years, come out to get their newspapers. They saw them look at the orange sticker on the door, then look at the car where Loretta and Terrence were hiding. They saw the neighbors shake their heads and go back inside. No one came to help. No one brought coffee. They were pariahs. By mid-afternoon, the hunger was a physical pain. The adrenaline of the wedding and the arrest had worn off, leaving a hollow, aching emptiness. Loretta was shivering, not just from the cold but from shock. She looked at Terrence. He was asleep, his mouth open, drooling onto the steering wheel. He looked pathetic. He looked weak. He looked nothing like the son of a tycoon. She reached for her phone. Her battery was at 12%. She scrolled through her contacts. Arthur Banks, blocked. Skylar, in jail. She scrolled past her sister, who had hung up on her an hour ago. She scrolled past her friends, who were probably gossiping about her right now. Her finger hovered over one name, Jeremiah. She knew she shouldn't. She knew she had burned that bridge, nuked it, and salted the earth. But hunger makes you do desperate things, and in her mind, twisted by entitlement, she still believed I owed her. She still believed she was the victim. She pressed the call button. My phone rang on the terrace of my villa in Lisbon. It was a beautiful afternoon. The sun was warm, the ocean was a deep, sparkling blue, and the air smelled of jasmine and sea salt. I was enjoying a late breakfast of fresh pastries, fruit, and strong coffee. I saw the name on the screen, Loretta. I smiled. I had been expecting this. I swiped to answer and put it on speaker. "Hello, Loretta," I said. My voice was calm, rich, and steady. "How is the honeymoon going?" "Jeremiah," she sobbed. The sound was ragged and wet. "Oh God, Jeremiah, please help me. It is a nightmare. They took everything. They locked us out of the house. We are sleeping in the car. We haven't eaten in 24 hours. Please, Jeremiah, you have to help us." I took a sip of coffee. "Why would I help you, Loretta? You have a new husband, a wealthy husband, a man who knows how to treat a woman. Surely Arthur has a plan. Arthur is a monster," she wailed. "He lied to me. He stole from me. I never loved him, Jeremiah, I swear." I was confused. "He manipulated me. I only married him because I thought it would help Terrence. It was always you, Jeremiah. You are the only good man I have ever known. I still love you. Please, just wire us some money for a hotel, just for a few nights." I listened to her lies. They were clumsy and desperate. She did not love me. She loved safety. She loved a meal ticket. She was trying to charm the man she had called a failure just yesterday. "You love me," I repeated flatly. "That is interesting, because yesterday you stood in a ballroom and watched our son call me a miser and a coward. You clapped for him. You laughed when he said he was changing his name." "I was scared," she pleaded. "Arthur forced us. He is dangerous, but I am free of him now. I want to come back to you. I want to come home." "There is no home, Loretta," I said. "You gambled the house. You signed a high-interest loan to buy diamonds that didn't exist. You lost the house." "But the bank took it," she cried. "We can fight the bank. We just need a lawyer. You have your pension. We can get an apartment until we fix this." I set my coffee cup down on the saucer. It made a sharp, clinking sound. "There is no bank, Loretta," I said. My voice dropped an octave. It became the voice of the man who ran the railway yard. "The private lender you borrowed from wanted to get rid of the toxic debt. They sold the note yesterday morning. Do you know who bought it? Do you know who holds the mortgage on 142 Elm Street right now?" Silence on the other end. "It is me, Loretta," I said. "I bought the debt. I own the mortgage. I am the one who ordered the foreclosure. I am the one who told them to change the locks. I am the bank." Loretta gasped. It sounded like she was choking. "You," she whispered. "You did this. You put us on the street. You put yourself on the street," I corrected her. "I just bought the pavement." Terrence's voice suddenly cut in. He must have woken up and grabbed the phone. "Dad," he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Is that true? You own the house. Then let us in. Open the door. We are freezing. We are hungry. You cannot leave your family like this." "You are not my family, Terrence," I said. "You made that very clear in your speech. You are Arthur Banks's son now. Ask him for a key." "But he is in jail," Terrence screamed. "Dad, stop playing games. If you have money to buy the mortgage, you have money to help us. Where did you get that money? You are broke. You are living in a hostel. You are a fraud." I decided it was time. The final reveal. The curtain drop. "I am going to switch to video," I said. "Accept the request." I tapped the button. The call switched. The connection established. On my screen, I saw them. It was pathetic. They were squeezed into the front seat of that tiny car. Loretta's mascara was smeared across her face like war paint. Her dress was ruined. Terrence looked like a corpse, pale and sweating. The background was the blurry street of our old neighborhood. On their screen, they saw me. They saw me sitting in a silk robe that shimmered in the sunlight. They saw the marble table. They saw the spread of fruit, the silver coffee pot, the crystal glass of juice. And behind me, filling the frame, was the view. The Atlantic Ocean, vast and majestic, framed by the white pillars of my terrace. I am not in a hostel, Terence, I said, looking directly into the camera. I am in my villa, in Cascais. I bought it 10 years ago. It has 5 bedrooms, 6 baths, and a wine cellar deeper than your debt. Loretta stared at the screen. Her mouth hung open. She looked at the view, then at me. She saw the health in my face. She saw the peace. You have millions, she whispered. The realization hit her like a physical blow. You were rich the whole time. You let me clip coupons. You let me worry about the electric bill. You had millions and you hid it. I did not hide it, I said. I invested it. I saved it. I built a legacy. And I tried to teach you both the value of money. But you didn't want to learn. You wanted to spend. You wanted to show off. So I let you go. I let you find someone who spent money the way you wanted. And look where it got you. You owe us, Terence shouted, but there was no power in his voice. He was staring at the villa with pure, unadulterated greed. That is my inheritance. You have to share it. I have to do nothing, I said. I offered you a life of stability. You spat on it. You wanted a rich father. Well, here he is. And he is telling you no. I do not have any intention of saving you, Loretta, I said to my ex-wife. I am not going to wire you money. I am not going to unlock the door. Then what are you going to do? She wept. We will die out here. No, you won't, I said. You are survivors. Like rats, you will figure it out. Get a job. Wash dishes. I hear the prison cafeteria is hiring. Maybe you can work near Arthur. You are cruel, she hissed. I am just, I replied. I leaned forward. But I am not done yet. I am coming back to America, Terence. Hope flared in his eyes. You are coming to get us. No, I said. I am coming back to liquidate. I am going to sell the house on Elm Street at a public auction. I am going to testify against Arthur Banks to ensure he never sees daylight again. And I am going to make sure that you and your wife pay back every cent you stole from the hotel. I stood up, the ocean breeze catching my robe. I will be there in 2 days, I said. Do not be at the airport. Do not be at the house. If I see you on my property, I will have you arrested for trespassing. I reached for the button to end the call. Dad, wait, Terence begged. Dad, please. Goodbye, Mr. Banks, I said. I tapped the screen. Their faces disappeared. The connection was severed. I was alone on my terrace, surrounded by luxury and silence. I took a deep breath. It was done. They knew. The secret was out. And now I had a plane to catch. I had a house to sell. And I had a final lesson to teach. 2 days later, the front lawn of the house on Elm Street looked like a battlefield after the ceasefire. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, but the sidewalk was crowded. There were real estate investors holding clipboards. There were neighbors peeking through their blinds. And there was a sheriff deputy standing by the curb, his arms crossed over his chest, ensuring the peace was kept. In the center of this circus stood my son Terence and his wife Skylar. They looked like ghosts. Terence was wearing the same tuxedo trousers from the wedding, but now they were stained with grass and grease. He was barefoot. Skylar, who had managed to post bail by pawning her engagement ring, looked even worse. Her hair was a bird nest. Her makeup was smeared from 2 days of crying. They were screaming at the potential buyers, trying to scare them away. "This is illegal," Terence shouted, waving his arms like a windmill. "You cannot sell this house. My father owns it. He is going to come back and sue all of you. Get off my lawn." A man in a cheap suit ignored him and made a note on his paper. Skylar lunged at a woman who was looking at the roofline. "Don't you look at my house, you vulture," she shrieked. "We have rights. We have squatters' rights." The sheriff took a step forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, step back. The foreclosure is legal. The auction starts in 5 minutes. If you disrupt it again, I will revoke your bail and put you back in a cell." Skylar shrank back, hissing like a feral cat. They were cornered. They were desperate. They were waiting for a miracle. They thought the miracle would be a legal injunction or a clerical error. They did not know the miracle was coming down the street on 4 wheels, and it was not there to save them. A low hum cut through the noise of the argument. It was a deep, powerful engine sound that vibrated in the chest. The investors turned their heads. The sheriff straightened up. A car turned onto Elm Street. It was not just a car, it was a statement. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, jet black with tinted windows and chrome rims that shone like mirrors. It moved slowly, parting the sea of onlookers like a shark swimming through a school of fish. Behind it followed a black SUV. Terrence stopped screaming. He stared at the car, his mouth hanging open. He had never seen a car like that in this neighborhood. In this zip code, people drove Fords and Toyotas. This was a machine that cost more than the house being sold. The Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb right in front of the for sale sign. The SUV stopped behind it. Two large men in dark suits got out of the SUV. They were not police. They were private security. They wore earpieces and expressions of absolute boredom. They scanned the crowd, then moved to the rear door of the Phantom. One of them opened the door. A polished black leather shoe stepped onto the cracked pavement. Then a leg clad in fine Italian wool. Then the man himself emerged. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. It was a bespoke suit, tailored in Milan charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe. I wore sunglasses that cost $1,000. On my wrist was a Patek Philippe, legitimate and heavy. I took a breath of the air. It smelled of cut grass and desperation. I took off my sunglasses and looked at the house. Then I looked at the two people shivering on the lawn. The silence on the street was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Terrence squinted at me. He tilted his head. He looked confused, as if his brain could not process the visual data. He saw the face of his father, but the packaging was wrong. He was looking for a man in oil-stained overalls. He was looking for a man who smelled of diesel and old coffee. He was looking for a victim. Instead, he saw a king. "Dad," Terrence whispered. The word carried across the silent lawn. Skylar grabbed his arm. "That is not him," she hissed. "That cannot be him. Look at the car, Terrence. Look at the suit. Your dad buys his clothes at the Goodwill." I walked toward them. The crowd parted instinctively, making a wide path. My security detail flanked me, moving with a synchronized grace. I stopped 5 feet away from my son. I looked him up and down. I looked at his dirty feet. I looked at his red eyes. "Hello, Terrence," I said. My voice was calm, projected with the authority of a man who commanded rail yards for 40 years. "You look terrible." "It is you," Terrence gasped. He took a step forward, his hands reaching out as if to touch me to verify I was real. "Dad, you came back. You came to help us. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let us lose the house." He tried to hug me. The security guard on my right stepped in, moving faster than a man his size should be able to move. He put a hand on Terrence's chest and pushed him back, not gently. "Back away, sir," the guard said. Terrence stumbled, looking betrayed. "Dad, tell him to let me go. I am your son." I adjusted my cufflink. "You made it very clear at the wedding that you were Arthur Banks' son, Terrence. You said I was a failure. You said I was obsolete. I was drunk," Terrence pleaded, tears forming in his eyes. "I didn't mean it. Arthur brainwashed us, Dad. He made us say those things. But you are here now. You have money. Look at this car. You can pay off the debt. You can buy the house back for us." Skylar pushed past Terrence. Her eyes were locked on the Rolls-Royce. The fear in her face had vanished, replaced instantly by a hunger so raw it was disgusting to witness. She saw the wealth, and her survival instinct kicked in. She smoothed her dirty hair and put on a trembling smile. "Jeremiah," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Oh, Jeremiah, we were so worried about you. We thought you were in a hostel. We thought you were suffering. Did you win the lottery? Is that it? Did you buy a ticket before you left?" She stepped closer, ignoring the guard. "That is amazing, Jeremiah. We are so happy for you. We can start over. We can be a family again. You can meet your grandson properly. We will name him Jeremiah. We will change it back." I laughed. It was a dry, short sound. "I did not win the lottery, Skylar," I said. "I do not gamble. Gambling is for fools and desperate people." "Then how?" she asked, gesturing at the car, at the suit, at the entourage. "How do you have all this? You were an engineer. You made $60,000 a year." "I made $60,000 a year from the railroad," I corrected her. "But that was just my day job. I took a step closer so I could look down into her greedy eyes. I have been a real estate investor for 30 years, Skylar. When you were still in diapers, I was buying distressed commercial properties in downtown. When you were learning to read, I was closing deals on apartment complexes. I own the building where you get your nails done. I own the warehouse district where your husband works. I own the land under the coffee shop where you met Arthur Banks. Skylar's mouth fell open. Terrence looked like he had been hit with a shovel. You own it, Terrence whispered. All of it. $12 million in assets, I said, held in blind trusts, managed by Mr. Goldstein. I built an empire while you were sleeping, Terrence. I built it for us. I built it for the family. I lived quietly so I could leave you a legacy that would last for generations. I paused, letting the weight of the words crush them. But you did not want a legacy. You wanted a show. You wanted flash. You looked at my dirty hands and you felt shame. You looked at my old truck and you felt embarrassment. You did not want to do the work. You just wanted the prize. But we didn't know, Skylar wailed. Why didn't you tell us? Because character is what you do when you think no one is watching, I said. And I watched you. I watched you treat me like a burden. I watched you plan to sell my house the moment I died. I watched you sell your own name to a con man because he drove a rented Bentley. You failed the test, both of you. I turned away from them and looked at the sheriff. Officer, I said. Yes, Mr. Brooks, the sheriff replied, touching the brim of his hat. He knew who I was now. Who holds the note on this property? I asked. The sheriff looked at his clipboard. The mortgage is held by Lisbon Holdings, LLC, sir. They are the creditor forcing the sale. I nodded. That is my company. I am the creditor. Terrence let out a strangled sound. You are foreclosing on us. I am foreclosing on the debt your mother signed, I said. And since you are squatting on the property, I am exercising my right as the owner to clear the land before the sale. I looked at the auctioneer who was standing by the porch, waiting for the drama to end. Cancel the auction, I said. The crowd murmured. The auctioneer looked confused. Sir, if you cancel the auction, the property reverts to the bank. I am the bank, I reminded him. And I have decided not to sell. I have decided to transfer the title. Terrence's eyes lit up. Hope is a dangerous thing. He thought I was giving it to him. He thought after all the speeches, I was going to hand him the keys. You are giving it to us, he breathed. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. I promise I will take care of it. I looked at him with a profound sadness. No, Terrence, you are not getting the house. You cannot afford the taxes. I turned to the black SUV. A woman stepped out. She was young, dressed in a simple business suit. She held a briefcase. This is the representative for the Inner City Housing Initiative, I announced to the crowd. I am donating this property to their organization. As of this moment, 142 Elm Street will be a transitional shelter for families who have lost their homes to fraud and financial abuse. Skylar screamed. No, you can't. That is my house. I picked out the paint. It is a shelter now, I said. And you are trespassing. I looked at the security guards. Remove them, I said. The guards moved in. Terrence tried to plant his feet, but he was weak from hunger and shock. The guard took him by the arm and marched him toward the sidewalk. Skylar tried to bite the other guard, but he simply clamped a hand on her shoulder and propelled her forward. They were dragged off the lawn, kicking and screaming, past the neighbors, past the investors, past the life they thought they deserved. They were thrown onto the public sidewalk. I stood on the porch of my old house. I looked at the peeling paint on the railing. I looked at the spot where I used to sit and drink my coffee. It was just a house. It was wood and brick. It wasn't a home anymore. The representative from the charity walked up the steps. Mr. Brooks, she said, handing me a receipt. Thank you. This will change lives. It already has, I said. I walked back to the Rolls-Royce. I did not look at my son who was sobbing on the curb. I did not look at my daughter-in-law who was screaming obscenities at the sky. I got into the car and the door closed with a solid, heavy thud, shutting out the noise. To the airport, I told the driver. We pulled away, leaving them behind. They were exactly where they belonged, on the outside looking in. They had wanted to be free of me. They had wanted to be independent. Now they were. They were free to succeed or fail on their own merits. And judging by the scene in the rearview mirror, they were failing spectacularly. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Skylar. "I am sorry," she wrote. "I love you, Dad. Please don't leave us." I blocked the number. The car accelerated onto the highway. I settled back into the leather seat. I had one more stop to make before I went back to Portugal. One more loose end to tie up. Loretta was waiting. She didn't know it yet, but her reckoning was just beginning. And unlike the house, this one was going to be personal. The security guard had his hand on Skylar's shoulder, ready to march her off the property, but she planted her feet. She looked at the Rolls-Royce gleaming in the sun. She looked at the Italian silk of my suit. She looked at the faces of the crowd, who were watching the show of the century. And then she looked at Terrence, who was weeping into his dirty hands on the curb. You could practically hear the gears grinding in her head. She was running a cost-benefit analysis in real time. On one side was a husband who was broke, humiliated, and disinherited. On the other side was a father-in-law who was worth $12 million and had just proven he held all the cards. Skylar made her choice in a split second. She shrugged off the guard's hand with a violence that surprised him. She did not run away. She ran toward me. She dropped to her knees right there on the sidewalk, heedless of the dirt staining her legs. She grabbed the hem of my trousers, her hands trembling. "Dad," she cried, her voice cracking with a theatrical sob. "Dad, please listen to me. I am so sorry. I was blind. I was manipulated. It was him." She pointed a shaking finger at Terrence, who looked up, his eyes red and confused. "It was Terrence," she shouted, her voice gaining strength. "He forced me to do it, Jeremiah. He told me you were mean. He told me you were hiding money from us. But he didn't tell me you were a genius. He made me sign those papers with Arthur. He made me give away the college fund. I tried to stop him, Dad. I begged him to listen to reason. But he is so weak. He is so stupid." Terrence stared at her, his mouth hanging open. "Skylar, what are you saying? You told me to do it. You said Dad was obsolete." "Shut up," Skylar snapped, turning on him with a look of pure venom. "You are a loser, Terrence. You have always been a loser. Your father is a king and you treated him like garbage. I only went along with it because I was afraid of you." She turned back to me, her face transforming instantly into a mask of adoration. "Dad, I can make this right. I know you are alone. I know you need someone to look after your affairs. I can do that. I can be the daughter you never had. I am smart, Jeremiah. I am ambitious just like you. I can manage your properties. I can organize your schedule. I will take care of you in your old age. I will never let anyone hurt you again." She clung to my leg, looking up at me with big, wet eyes. "Please, Dad, take me with you. Take me to Portugal. I will leave him. I will divorce Terrence today. He is dead weight. But we are the same, you and me. We are survivors. Let me prove it to you." The crowd watched in stunned silence. Even the sheriff looked uncomfortable. It was a display of naked opportunism so vile it made the air feel heavy. Skylar was offering to trade her husband for a seat in my private jet. She was selling her loyalty to the highest bidder, right in front of the man she had married. I looked down at her. I felt nothing but disgust. She was not a survivor. She was a parasite. And parasites do not negotiate. They just feed. "Get up, Skylar," I said, my voice cold. "You are embarrassing yourself." "I am not embarrassed," she insisted, tightening her grip. "I am desperate. I want to learn from you. I want to be on the winning team. Terrence is the past. You are the future. Please, Jeremiah, just give me a chance." I signaled to the guard. He handed me my tablet. I tapped the screen, opening a file I had saved months ago. It was a video file, recorded by the hidden security camera I had installed in the living room 3 weeks before the divorce. I had never shown it to anyone. I had saved it for a moment just like this. "You say you love me, Skylar," I said. "You say you want to take care of me. You say Terrence forced you to be cruel." "Yes," she breathed, nodding eagerly. "Yes, that is the truth." "Then explain this," I said. I turned the volume up to the maximum and held the tablet down so she could see the screen. Terrence could see it too from where he sat on the curb. The audio was crystal clear, cutting through the quiet morning air. On the screen it was night. I had gone to bed early that evening, feigning a headache. Skylar and Terrence were in the living room drinking my wine. Skylar was pacing back and forth. "Why won't he just die?" Skylar's voice on the recording was sharp and impatient. "He is 71 years old. How much longer can he last? He coughs all night. He smells like Old Spice and failure. I am sick of looking at him, Terrence. I am sick of living in his house. Terrence's voice on the recording was mumbled. "He is healthy, Sky. The doctor said his heart is strong." "Then we need to stress him out," Skylar hissed on the video. "We need to make his life miserable until his heart gives out." I researched it. Stress induces cardiac arrest in the elderly. We need to pick fights. We need to make him feel useless. I want this house, Terrence. I want him gone. If he doesn't die soon, I'm going to put rat poison in his coffee and blame it on his senility. The recording ended. The silence on the street was absolute. The neighbors who were watching from their porches looked horrified. The sheriff took a step closer, his hand moving to his radio. Skylar let go of my leg. She scrambled back, crab walking across the grass, her face pale as a sheet. She could not deny it. It was her face. It was her voice. She had not just wished for my death. She had plotted it. I looked at Terrence. He was no longer crying. He was staring at the tablet, his face a mask of shock. He had heard her say mean things before, but he had never heard that. He had never heard her talk about poisoning his father. "You said that," Terrence whispered. "You wanted to kill him." Skylar stood up, brushing the dirt off her knees. She tried to regain her composure, but her eyes were darting around, looking for an escape route. "I was venting," she said, her voice shrill. "I was just talking. Everyone says things they don't mean when they are frustrated." "You talked about rat poison," I said calmly. "You talked about inducing a heart attack. That is not venting, Skylar. That is conspiracy to commit murder, and I have sent a copy of this video to the district attorney." Skylar's eyes went wide. "You what?" Terrence stood up. He moved slowly like a man waking up from a coma. He looked at his wife. He looked at the woman who had spent the last 3 years isolating him from his family, draining his bank account, and turning him into a beggar. He saw her for the first time without the filter of his own infatuation. He saw a monster. "You lied to me," Terrence said, his voice rising. "You told me you loved Dad. You told me you just wanted us to be independent. You wanted him dead." "I did it for us," Skylar screamed. "I did it so we could have money, so we wouldn't have to be poor like him." "We are poor," Terrence roared. "We are worse than poor. We are homeless. We are criminals, and it is because I listened to you." He lunged at her. It was an explosion of pent-up rage and shame. He tackled her onto the grass. It wasn't a fight between a man and a woman. It was a brawl between 2 drowning people trying to climb on top of each other. Skylar scratched his face, drawing blood. Terrence grabbed her hair, pulling her down. They rolled around on the lawn of the house they had tried to steal, screaming obscenities at each other. It was ugly, it was primal, and it was the inevitable conclusion of a relationship built on greed. "Hey, break it up," the sheriff shouted, running forward. He grabbed Terrence by the back of his tuxedo jacket and hauled him off. Another deputy who had arrived on the scene grabbed Skylar. They stood there panting and bleeding, held apart by the law. Terrence's lip was split. Skylar's dress was torn at the shoulder. They looked at each other with pure hatred. The love was gone. The partnership was gone. All that was left was the blame. "I am done," Skylar spat, spitting blood onto the grass. "I am done with you. You are a weak, broke loser. I want a divorce." "You want a divorce?" Terrence laughed, a manic, broken sound. "Good. Take it. Take everything." "Oh, wait. You can't take anything because we have nothing. You spent it all, Skylar. You spent every dime I had." "I am leaving," Skylar announced, trying to smooth her hair. "I am going to find a real man. A man with money, not a daddy's boy who cries on the curb." She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were cold and hard. "You think you won, old man?" she hissed. "You think you were smart. You were just a sad, lonely miser who had to buy a new life because his real family hated him. Enjoy your money. It won't keep you warm when you are dead." She turned and began to walk away, clicking down the sidewalk in her broken heels, holding her head high despite the ruins surrounding her. She did not look back at Terrence. She did not look back at the house. She walked toward the main road, looking for a taxi, looking for the next mark, looking for someone else to bleed dry. "Let her go," I said to the sheriff. "She will not get far. She has pending charges for the hotel fraud. They will pick her up before she crosses the county line." Terrence slumped against the patrol car. He watched her go. He looked at me. His eyes were empty. He had lost his wife. He had lost his house. He had lost his money. And he knew he had lost his father long ago. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. I looked at him. I adjusted my cuffs. "Sorry does not pay the rent, Terrence," I said. I turned back to the Rolls-Royce. The show was over. The truth had been revealed. Skylar was exposed for the predator she was, and Terrence was left in the wreckage. I had one more stop to make. One more person needed to face the music. Loretta was waiting at the police station, trying to talk her way out of the fraud charges. I needed to be there when the hammer fell. To the precinct, I told the driver. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window at my son. He was sitting on the curb alone, head in his hands. He was finally independent. He was finally free of me. I hoped he enjoyed it. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and fear. It was a sterile, cold environment designed to strip away emotion and leave only the raw facts of the law. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting on the polished mahogany surface. I was wearing a navy blue suit today, cut from a fabric so fine it felt like water against my skin. Next to me sat Mr. Goldstein. He was arranging his papers with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. He did not look at the defense table. He did not need to. He knew exactly what was going to happen. Across the aisle sat my son, Terrence. He looked small. The swagger he had displayed at the wedding, the arrogance he had worn like a crown while toasting to Arthur Banks, was gone. He was wearing a cheap suit that was 2 sizes too big, likely bought at a thrift store with whatever change he could scrape together. His head was bowed. He was shaking. Behind him, in the gallery, sat Loretta. She was wearing a plain dress, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, her eyes red and swollen. She looked at me with a desperate, pleading intensity. She was silently begging me to stop this. She was hoping that the father in me would override the creditor. But the father had left the building a long time ago. The man sitting in this chair was Jeremiah Brooks, the businessman, and business was about to be concluded. The judge entered, her robe swishing softly. She was a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked at the docket, then at us. "We are here to address the matter of the fraudulent withdrawal of funds and identity theft," the judge said. Her voice was dry. "Mr. Brooks, you are alleging that the defendant, your son, accessed your accounts without authorization." "I am not just alleging it, Your Honor," Goldstein said, standing up. "We are proving it." Terrence's public defender, a young man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, stood up. "Your Honor, my client maintains that this was a misunderstanding. He believed he had implied consent. It was a family emergency. He thought his father would want to help him." The judge looked at Terrence. "Mr. Brooks, did you sign your father's name to a withdrawal slip for $50,000? Terrence stood up. His legs were wobbly. I did, Your Honor. But it was for an investment. I was going to pay him back. I thought since he was leaving the country, he wouldn't need it right away. Skylar said it would be okay. She said Dad always bailed us out. I watched him throw his wife under the bus. It was instinct now. Everyone was to blame except him." Goldstein walked to the center of the room. He held up a document. It was blown up on the projector screen for everyone to see. It was a withdrawal slip from my primary savings account. The date was stamped clearly at the top. The time was 10:15 a.m. "Your Honor," Goldstein said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "At 10:15 a.m. on the day in question, my client, Jeremiah Brooks, was at JFK International Airport, passing through security for a flight to Lisbon. He was physically incapable of being at the bank branch on Main Street. He pointed to the signature on the screen. It was a shaky, looped scrawl. It looked like my signature, but it lacked the sharp, angular precision of an engineer's hand. It was a forgery. A clumsy, desperate forgery, made by a man who had never paid attention to the details of his father's life. "This is not my client's signature," Goldstein continued. "This is a tracing, and we have the security footage from the bank." He played the video. On the screen, grainy but unmistakable, was Terrence. He was standing at the teller window. He was sweating. He was looking over his shoulder. He pushed the slip across the counter. The teller hesitated. Terrence leaned in, saying something urgent. The teller, a woman who had known our family for years, finally nodded and began counting out the cash. Terrence put his head in his hands. He could not look at the screen. He could not look at the evidence of his own crime. "He stole $50,000, Goldstein said. "He stole it from the man who paid for his education. He stole it to give to a con artist named Arthur Banks, who is currently awaiting federal trial. But the destination of the money is irrelevant. The crime is the theft. The crime is the betrayal of trust. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "this is a serious charge. It carries a mandatory prison sentence. This is your son." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at the judge, and then I turned to look at Terrence. He lifted his head. His eyes were wet. He looked like he was 5 years old again, waiting for me to fix his broken toy. "Dad," Terrence whispered, "please. I am sorry. I was stupid. I lost everything. Skylar left me. I am living in a shelter. Don't send me to jail, please. I am your boy." The room was silent. Loretta let out a sob from the gallery. "Jeremiah," she cried out, "have mercy. He is our son." I looked at them. I remembered the wedding. I remembered the speech. I remembered him standing in front of 300 people and calling me a failure. I remembered him saying he wanted to change his name because mine wasn't good enough. He didn't want to be a Brooks when it meant hard work and humility. He only wanted to be a Brooks when it meant he could steal my money. He wasn't a boy. He was a 38-year-old man who had made a series of conscious, malicious choices. He had chosen greed over loyalty. He had chosen flash over substance. And now, he wanted me to pay the bill for his choices one last time. He wanted me to be the safety net, but I had cut the ropes. "Mr. Brooks," the judge repeated, "the court has discretion in sentencing if the victim requests leniency. Do you wish to press charges, or do you wish to treat this as a civil matter of restitution?" I looked Terrence in the eye. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the man he had underestimated. "He is not a child, Your Honor," I said. My voice was deep and steady. "He is a grown man." He stood in a room full of people and declared that he was independent. He declared that he had found a new father who was better than me. He made his choice. Terrence began to shake his head. "No, Dad, no. He forged my signature," I continued. "He looked a woman in the eye who has known him since he was a baby, and he lied to her to steal my savings. That is not a mistake. That is a character flaw. That is malice." I paused. I felt a weight in my chest, the heavy stone of grief for the relationship that could have been. But I pushed it aside. Justice required a steady hand. "If I let him go today," I said, "he will learn nothing. He will think that tears and apologies are currency. He will think that he can steal and lie and cheat, and Daddy will always be there to clean up the mess. I am done cleaning up his messes." I turned back to the judge. "No, Your Honor. I do not wish to drop the charges. He is a thief, and thieves go to prison." The gavel came down. It was a sharp, final sound. "Sentencing is set for immediately following the verdict," the judge said. "The defendant is remanded to custody." 2 bailiffs moved in. They were large men with indifferent faces. They approached Terrence. He stood up, his knees buckling. He looked at me one last time. It wasn't anger in his eyes anymore. It was shock. He had never believed, not really, that I would go through with it. He had always counted on my weakness. He had mistaken my love for stupidity. "Dad," Terrence screamed as they grabbed his arms. "Dad, don't do this. I am scared." They spun him around. I heard the metallic click of the handcuffs. It was a sound of finality, Loretta screamed from the gallery. A high, piercing sound of a mother watching her child being taken away. She tried to run to him, but the security guard blocked her path. "Jeremiah," she shrieked at me. "You are a monster. How can you do this? He is your flesh and blood." I looked at her. She was ruined. She was broken. And she still didn't get it. "He stopped being my flesh and blood when he sold me out for a rental car, Loretta," I said calmly. "Now, he is just a man who broke the law." The bailiffs marched Terrence toward the side door. He was weeping openly now, his shoulders shaking, the cheap suit bunching up around the handcuffs. He looked back at me over his shoulder, his face twisted with fear. I watched him go. I did not look away. I owed him that much. I owed him the respect of witnessing the consequences of his actions. The door closed behind him. He was gone. I picked up my papers. Goldstein closed his briefcase with a snap. "Are you all right, Jeremiah?" Goldstein asked quietly. I straightened my tie. I checked my watch. "I have a flight to catch," I said. "My business here is concluded." We walked out of the courtroom. Loretta was slumped on a bench in the hallway, sobbing into her hands. She did not look up as I passed. She was alone in the wreckage she had helped create. I walked out into the sunlight. The air was crisp. I felt a strange lightness. The burden was gone. The leech had been removed. It had been painful, yes. It had required a surgery that left a scar, but the infection was gone. I got into the back of the car. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to, Mr. Brooks?" "Take me to the airport," I said. "And then, take the long way. I want to see the ocean before I go." As the car pulled away, I closed my eyes. I saw Terrence's face. I saw the handcuffs. It was a hard image to hold, but then I saw my villa. I saw the sun setting over the water. I saw the future. And for the first time in 38 years, the future belonged entirely to me. The doors of the state penitentiary slammed shut behind my son, and the sound was final. Terrence did not get probation. The judge wanted to make an example of him. He got 3 years for identity theft and fraud. I did not visit him. I received letters from the prison chaplain telling me that Terrence was having a hard time. He was soft. He was used to air conditioning and soft mattresses, and money that appeared by magic. Now he was in a cage with men who had fought for every scrap of food they ever ate. I did not feel joy at this. No father wants to see his son in a cage. But I felt a grim sense of order. The world has rules. Gravity pulls down. Fire burns. And if you steal from the hand that feeds you, eventually you starve. Skylar did not stick around to see her husband locked up. She did not even attend the sentencing. She was a rat and the ship had sunk, so she started swimming. She fled the state 2 days after the wedding disaster, heading south to Miami. She was looking for another Arthur Banks. She was looking for another shortcut. I heard rumors later from Silva, my investigator. He told me she had met a man in a hotel bar who claimed to be a developer from Dubai. He promised her a modeling career. He promised her diamonds. She got into a car with him and she vanished across the border. The last report said she was stuck in a nightmare somewhere in Central America, stripped of her passport and her arrogance, paying a very high price for her addiction to easy money. She wanted a life of glamour without working for it. She found out that the only free cheese is in the mousetrap. That left Loretta, my ex-wife, the woman who had looked at my calloused hands with disgust, the woman who had gambled her home on a lie. Her fall was the slowest and the most painful. After the wedding, she was homeless. She had no skills. She had no work history for the last 30 years because I had supported her. She had no friends because she had treated everyone like they were beneath her. She moved into a state-funded shelter for a week until her time ran out. Then she had to face reality. She got a job. It was the first job she had held since the Reagan administration. She found work at a Greasy Spoon diner on the edge of town washing dishes. My wife, who had demanded Vera Wang dresses and 5-star resorts, was now scrubbing dried egg yolk off cheap ceramic plates for minimum wage. Her hands, the hands she used to manicure so carefully, became red and chapped. Her back ached. Her feet swelled. She was living the life she had always looked down on. I returned to America 2 months later. I did not come back to live. I came back to cut the ribbon. I had bought back the house on Elm Street from my own holding company. I had renovated it. I had turned the bedrooms into offices and the living room into a meeting hall. It was now the Brooks Center for Elder Financial Protection. It was a fortress designed to help old men and women protect their assets from predatory families and con artists. On the day of the opening, I stood on the porch wearing a suit that cost more than Loretta made in a year. There were reporters, there were city officials, and standing at the back of the crowd, wearing a faded uniform and looking 20 years older than her actual age, was Loretta. She waited until the crowd dispersed. She waited until the cameras were gone. Then she walked up the steps. She walked with a limp. She looked at the house. She looked at the fresh paint. She looked at the sign with my name on it. Then she looked at me. "Jeremiah," she whispered. Her voice was thin and raspy. "Hello, Loretta," I said. I did not offer her my hand. "I saw you on the news," she said. "You look good. You look powerful." "I am content," I replied. She started to cry. It was a quiet, defeated sound. "I am so tired, Jeremiah. I work 10 hours a day standing on concrete. I live in a room above a garage that smells like gasoline. I have nothing. Arthur took it all. Terrence is in jail. I am all alone." I listened. I did not interrupt. "I know I was wrong," she continued. "I know I was awful to you. I was blinded by greed. I thought I deserved more. But look at me now. I am paying for it. Haven't I paid enough?" "What do you want, Loretta?" I asked. I want help, she begged, reaching out to touch my sleeve. I pulled back. I am not asking for a mansion, Jeremiah. I am not asking for us to get back together. I know that is over. But please, you have millions. You wouldn't even miss a few $1,000s. Just enough to get me a small apartment. Just enough so I don't have to scrub dishes until I die. I looked at her. I saw the woman I had loved for decades. I saw the mother of my son, and I saw the person who had signed a loan to give my money to a thief. I am not going to give you money, Loretta, I said. My voice was hard as iron. I am not going to write you a check. If I give you money, you will lose it. You will find another Arthur. You will buy something foolish. You do not respect money because you never earned it. She sobbed louder, covering her face. So that is it. You are going to let me starve. You are going to watch me rot. No, I said. I am not going to let you starve. I am going to give you something better than money. I am going to give you dignity. She looked up, confused. What? I need a janitor, I said. She stared at me. Her mouth fell open. A janitor. This center is going to be busy, I explained. People will be coming in and out all day. The floors need to be swept. The bathrooms need to be cleaned. The trash needs to be taken out. It is hard work. It is honest work. And it comes with health insurance. You want me to clean toilets? Loretta whispered. In my own house? In the house I used to own? It is not your house, I reminded her. It is my building, and you do not own it. But you know it better than anyone. You know where the dust settles. You know how to polish the wood. She looked at the house. She looked at the windows she used to look out of while waiting for me to come home so she could complain about her life. I pay $15 an hour, I said. That is double what you make at the diner. And I will let you rent the small studio apartment in the basement for a nominal fee. You will have a roof over your head. You will have a job. You will have security. But you will work for it. You will clock in and you will clock out. And you will answer to the office manager, not to me. She looked at me with a mixture of shame and fury. You are doing this to humiliate me. You want to see me on my knees. I want to see you on your feet, I countered. I carried you for 30 years, Loretta. I carried Terrence. And because I carried you, your legs got weak. You forgot how to walk. Now you are going to learn. You are going to sweat. You are going to earn your bread. And at the end of the day, when you sleep, you will sleep soundly because you paid for that bed with your own labor. I took a set of keys out of my pocket. They were the keys to the utility closet and the basement apartment. I held them out. Take it or leave it, Loretta. The diner is waiting. She looked at the keys. She looked at my face. She saw no pity there, only a challenge. She realized that the free ride was truly over. The bank of Jeremiah was closed. The employer Jeremiah was hiring. She reached out. Her hand was shaking. She took the keys. They jingled in the quiet afternoon air. Thank you, she whispered. It tasted like ash in her mouth. Report to the manager at 8 tomorrow morning, I said. Do not be late. I turned and walked to my car. I did not look back. But as my driver pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. I saw Loretta standing on the porch. She had opened the utility closet. She had taken out a broom. She began to sweep. She swept the dust off the porch of the house, where she had once demanded to be treated like a queen. She swept with a slow, rhythmic motion, back and forth, back and forth. It was a sad sight, but it was also a righteous one. She was finally contributing. She was finally understanding the value of $1. She was cleaning up the mess she had made of her life, one speck of dust at a time. I settled into the seat of the Rolls-Royce. The engine purred. I was going back to the airport. I was going back to Lisbon. I had a dinner date with a woman named Elena. She was a professor of history. She had her own money. She had her own life. She loved me for my mind, not my wallet. I closed my eyes. The image of Loretta sweeping the porch faded. The image of Terrence in his cell faded. They were in the past. They were lessons learned. I was Jeremiah Brooks. I was a survivor. I was a builder. And I was finally, truly free. 2 years have passed since I walked out of that courtroom and left the wreckage of my old life behind. 2 years is enough time for the dust to settle. It is enough time for the seasons to change and for a man to reinvent himself completely. I am sitting on the terrace of my villa in Cascais. The sun is dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The air is cool and smells of the ocean and the lemon trees in the garden. I am not alone. Across the table from me sits Elena. She is beautiful, not just because of her features, but because of the intelligence in her eyes. She is a professor of Portuguese history at the university in Lisbon. She speaks 4 languages. She has her own apartment in the city. She has her own pension. She does not need me to pay her bills. She does not need me to validate her existence. We met at a jazz club in the Alfama district. I was drinking port alone, listening to a saxophone player. She sat next to me and we started talking about the music. We talked for 3 hours. She did not ask me what kind of car I drove. She did not ask me how much my watch cost. She asked me what I thought about the rhythm. She asked me what books I read. For the first time in 40 years, I was seen as a man, not a wallet. Elena reaches across the table and touches my hand. Her skin is warm. She smiles at me. It is a genuine smile. It reaches her eyes. There is no calculation behind it. There is no hidden agenda. She knows about my past. I told her everything. I told her about Loretta and Terrence and the house on Elm Street. She did not judge me. She just listened, and then she said something I will never forget. She said that a tree cannot grow if the roots are rotten. Sometimes you have to chop it down to save the soil. She pours more wine into my glass. It is a deep red vintage from the Douro Valley. We are celebrating tonight. My investment portfolio has outperformed the market again, but that is not why we are celebrating. We are celebrating because it is Tuesday, and we are alive, and we are free. The waiter brings a silver tray to the table. On it sits a single white envelope. The paper is cheap and rough. The stamp is domestic. The return address is a post office box in upstate New York. It is stamped with the seal of the Department of Corrections. Elena looks at the letter, then at me. "Is that from him?" she asks softly. I nod. It is from Terrence. I have received a letter every month for the past 2 years. The first ones were angry. They were filled with blame and accusations. He blamed me for the hard mattress. He blamed me for the bad food. He blamed me for the fact that he was in a cage while I was in a palace. I burned those letters without finishing them. Then the tone changed. The anger turned into begging. He asked for money for the commissary. He asked for a lawyer to file an appeal. He asked me to pull strings. I ignored those too. But the last few letters have been different. I pick up the envelope. It feels light. I use a silver knife to slice it open. I unfold the paper. The handwriting is neat. It is not the scrawl of a desperate man anymore. It is the writing of a man who has had a lot of time to think. "Dear Dad," the letter begins. "I hope this finds you well. I hope the weather in Portugal is as beautiful as you described in that video call. It is snowing here. The yard is covered in ice. I have been working in the library. I am teaching some of the other inmates how to read. It is hard work, but it feels good. It feels like I am doing something real." I pause. Terrence is teaching. My son, who never wanted to work a day in his life, is working for free, helping others. "I have been thinking a lot about what you said," the letter continues. "You said I wanted the prize without doing the work. You were right. I was weak, Dad. I was hollow. I let Skylar fill me up with poison because I didn't have any substance of my own. I let Arthur blind me because I wanted to be blind. I didn't want to see the grease under your fingernails because it reminded me that I was lazy. I take a sip of wine. The words are heavy. I know I can never pay you back the $50,000 Terrence writes. I know I can never undo the things I said at the wedding. That shame is my cellmate. It sleeps in the bunk next to me every night. But I want you to know that I am learning. I am learning that a name isn't what you call yourself. It is what you do. I am learning that respect is earned, not bought. I have 1 year left. When I get out, I am not going to ask you for anything. I am not going to come to Lisbon. I am going to get a job. Any job. I am going to rent a room. And I am going to try to be a man you might one day be willing to shake hands with. I am sorry, Dad, for everything. Love, Terrence. I fold the letter. I do not tear it up. I do not burn it. I place it back on the tray. What does it say? Elena asks. I look at her. I look at the ocean. The sun is gone now, replaced by a blanket of stars. He says he is sorry, I reply. And I think for the first time in his life, he actually means it. Do you forgive him? She asks. I think about it. Forgiveness is a tricky word. It implies that everything is okay. It implies that we can go back to the way things were. But we can never go back. The bridge is burned. The ashes have washed away. But maybe forgiveness isn't about fixing the past. Maybe it is just about letting go of the knife. I don't know if I forgive him, I say honestly. But I don't hate him anymore. I don't feel the need to punish him. Life has punished him enough. He is learning. That is all a father can ask for. And Loretta? Elena asks gently. I smile, a small, sad smile. Loretta is sweeping the porch. My manager at the center sends me reports. She shows up every day at 8 o'clock. She cleans the bathrooms. She mops the floors. She takes out the trash. She complains sometimes, but she does the work. She pays her rent on time. She is living a small life, a hard life, but it is an honest life. She is finally understanding the value of the roof over her head, because she is the one keeping it clean. They are all exactly where they need to be. I lean back in my chair. I feel the silk of my shirt. I feel the cool breeze. I think about the journey that brought me here. I think about the years I spent working on the railway, listening to the roar of the engines, smelling the diesel, feeling the vibration of the tracks in my bones. I did it for them. I did it to build a fortress for my family. But a fortress can become a prison if you don't know how to leave it. I had to tear it down to save myself. I look at the wine in my glass. It is dark and rich, like blood. Money is a strange thing. People think it is the goal. They think if they have enough zeros in their bank account, they will be happy. Arthur Banks thought that. Schuyler thought that. Even Loretta thought that. But money is just fuel. It can run a train or it can burn down a house. It depends on the engineer. I have $12 million. I have a villa. I have a Rolls Royce. But those are just things. They are nice things, but they are not my life. My life is this moment. My life is the woman sitting across from me who challenges my mind. My life is the peace of knowing that I am not being used. My life is the freedom to wake up in the morning and decide what I want to do, not what I have to do to keep ungrateful people happy. I picked up the check for my family's mistakes for 30 years. I paid for the cars, the colleges, the weddings, the bail. I paid with my sweat and my dignity. But the bill is finally settled. The account is closed. I pick up my glass. Elena picks up hers. We touch them together. The crystal rings a pure, clear note that hangs in the night air. To the future, Elena says. To the future, I agree. But inside, I add a silent toast. To the past. To the hard lessons. To the empty house on Elm Street. To the son in the cell and the ex-wife with the broom. I hope they find their way. I hope they find their peace. But they will have to find it without me. I take a drink. The wine is perfect. I look out at the ocean. It stretches on forever, vast and deep and indifferent. It reminds me that we are all small. We are all just passengers. I am Jeremiah Brooks. I was an engineer. I was a husband. I was a father. I was a victim. Now I am just a man. A man who learned that you cannot buy respect, but you can certainly charge for disrespect. A man who learned that sometimes the only way to save your family is to let them fall. I am happy, truly, deeply happy. I raise my glass of wine looking out at the ocean. The sweetest revenge is not destruction. It is not pain. It is not seeing them suffer. The sweetest revenge is living happily. We often spend our lives building safety nets for people who are holding the scissors. Through this journey, I learned that true family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty and mutual respect. My son and ex-wife chased the illusion of wealth and lost their souls, while I found peace in authenticity. The greatest lesson isn't about hoarding millions. It is about knowing your own worth. If you allow people to treat you like an option, they will never treat you like a priority. Sometimes, you have to let the people you love fall, so they can finally learn how to stand on their own. Freedom is expensive, but the price of dignity is non-negotiable. If you believe that respect is earned and not bought, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice served cold.